With over 250 entries across 7 tiers, looking at over 80 years worth of Marvel history, there is something for everybody in this definitive, ultimate, and I can't think of a third word, but it's the Marvel Iceberg. Woof. Hey guys, it's me Marcus, aka the Mad Dog, and we're finally back with another video. Now this is one that's been in the works for a while, but I've really got into watching these Iceberg videos. And for anybody who hasn't seen one of these before, then the first thing, do not worry. For this video, I've decided to go with 7 tiers, and I'm gonna do things a little bit differently. Instead of trying to judge what everybody may or may not know already, because then you know the comment section is just gonna be filled with people saying, why is that tier 4 when it should have been tier 3? I thought that after the first tier, I'm gonna give all the other ones a different type of theme. And because I wanted to make this the biggest possible Marvel Iceberg video that I could, I have used 3 different icebergs and merged them all together. So that means I've got to throw out a huge thank you to 2 Reddit users. We've got Solar Silencer and Royal Tenenbaum. But on top of that, to make this even bigger, I've also included everything that was included in the comments of both of those Reddit threads. And I've also included over 100 of my own entries. So yeah, it would be physically impossible for me to include absolutely every single thing that's ever happened in Marvel history, but I feel pretty confident in calling this the whammiest Marvel Iceberg that's been created so far. Now we're starting off at the sky, we're not even at the tip of the iceberg. And in here is going to be pretty much everything that is common knowledge. And I'm talking beyond the comic community. Like these are the kind of things that my parents know about. But still, if there's something that you didn't know from this one, then don't feel bad. There's going to be something that you'll probably know in the later tiers. But this is probably going to be filled with the ones that most people know about already. The MCU. For the 3 people that may not know, this stands for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. A franchise of movies based off the Marvel Comics characters that started with Iron Man in 2008 and is still going strong now. Although the quality of that strength is up for debate. The latest release, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, was the 32nd feature film and part of Phase 5, with the franchise managing to collect over $29.5 billion at the box office, and making it the most successful franchise of movies of all time, beating out the likes of Harry Potter, Star Wars, and James Bond. Stan Lee, pretty much the godfather of Marvel Comics and easily the most recognizable creator. Although there have been controversies over the years with who did the majority of the creating when it came to the characters, the impact of Stan Lee can't be understated. From the Avengers to the Fantastic Four to Spider-Man, Hulk, Black Panther and countless others, the vast majority of the Marvel characters we love today were created through Stan Lee's stories. And even non-comic readers know him from his cameos in the movies. Sadly, he passed away at the age of 95 in 2018, which honestly doesn't feel like it was 5 years ago. And in what feels quite poetic, his last cameo was in Avengers Endgame. Origin stories. Now every hero and villain has an origin story, and some haven't been changed since the characters debuted, and they're very widely known, such as Spider-Man being bitten by a radioactive spider, or Captain America being part of the Super Soldier program during World War II, but the more obscure the character, the more obscure their origin. For example, little-known hero Iron Man was bitten by a radioactive iron, but the origin was changed for the 2008 movie, so it'd be more accessible to audiences. And that's not true just before anybody takes it seriously. Disney/Fox, but during the 90s, Marvel sold the movie rights of certain characters to different companies. Sony got Spider-Man, Fox got Fantastic Four, X-Men, Daredevil and a few others, and in 2009 Disney purchased Marvel, comics and all, for $4 billion, meaning that movies were going to be distributed by Disney rather than Paramount. However, due to the contracts, Fox still owned their characters, but they lost the rights to Daredevil in 2012, and then Disney later purchased Fox, meaning that the characters previously inaccessible to the Marvel Cinematic Universe are now all available. And despite Disney now owning Beast from the X-Men, they never remade Beauty and the Beast but with Hank McCoy. S.H.I.E.L.D. For as common as the organisation might be, the acronym has changed a few times over the years, but it's hard to find a Marvel team or character that doesn't have some connection to S.H.I.E.L.D. since it first debuted in 1965. Between the pages of issue 135 in Strange Tales, it originally stood for Supreme Headquarters, International Espionage and Law Enforcement Division, which to me would make it S.H.I.E.L.D. In 1991, it was updated to the Strategic Hazard Intervention Espionage Logistics Directorate, and for the MCU and animated movies, it became the Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division. Their role within the Marvel Universe is to pretty much deal with any and all potential threats to Earth that have advanced technological, supernatural, or extraterrestrial powers. Sam Raimi movies and memes. A staple of my childhood. The Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy was released between 2002 and 2007, produced by Sony Pictures Pictures and featured Tobey Maguire in the lead role, with Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane, a name that is very difficult to say if you've got a bit of a lisp. Popular villains such as Green Goblin, Doc Ock, Sandman and Venom were featured throughout, and the success of the series almost delivered a fourth movie that was cancelled in favour for a reboot. This ain't going to be the last time they appear on this iceberg, but the memes that were spawned, such as Bully Maguire, and I forgot the part where that's my problem, have taken on a life of their own in the years since. Can't believe Spider-Man 2 is 20 years old next year. The Spider-Verse movies. The surprise hit of the last decade, but spinning out of the Sony animation studio, Into the Spider-Verse was released in 2018 and was the first fully animated Spider-Man feature film. Unless there's an earlier one I've forgotten. And focused on Miles Morales as he crossed paths with different Spider-People from across the multiverse. On a budget of $90 million, it returned $384 million and received rave reviews and took everyone, including myself, by surprise with just how good this was. The concept is loosely based on the Spider-Verse event that took place during Dan Slott's run, but it seems like I was completely in the minority with enjoying that. However, the movie was successful enough to have a 2023 sequel called Across the Spider-Verse, and despite being half a movie, it expanded the universe and managed to rake in just shy of $700 million against its $100 million budget, and was the second highest grossing animated movie for the year. However, allegations of poor working conditions for animators and the current writer's strike has meant that the planned third part, Beyond the Spider-Verse, has been indefinitely pushed back from its 2024 release date. X-Men/Deadpool movies timeline. Strap in for this explanation that's probably going to be wrong. But the timeline between the Fox X-Men and Deadpool movies is an absolute mess. You've got the Patrick Stewart Xavier movies, but you've also got the James McAvoy Xavier movies. The Deadpool series references both timelines, and there was also a fracturing of the continuity after Days of Future Past. There's also Logan, a 2017 movie which was meant to be the final act of Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, only until it was announced that he'd be reprising his role in Deadpool 3. But it's yet to be seen how that affects the timeline, if any attention's going to be paid to it at all. Alliterative names. Peter Parker, Reed Richards, Bruce Banner, and I'm not going to sit here and list them all because this video is probably going to be long enough already. But a large number of characters in the Marvel universe have the same first and last initial. However, the reason why this is the case is because Stan Lee created so many characters that he couldn't remember them all. Yet when they had the alliteration, as long as he could remember one initial, he could often get the full name. The tradition is still respected today where possible, and yeah, I'm looking at you, Miles Morales. Square Enix's Marvel's Avengers. What could have been. The first footage was revealed by Square Enix at E3 2019, which showed that it was going to be playable to be the different members of the Avengers and showcase their different skills. However, the more footage that was released, the more barebones and lackluster it appeared. On launch, it turned out to be worse than bad because it was just okay. The average scores on Metacritic were in the mid-60s, but criticised the repetitive gameplay, loot system, and technical issues. Post-launch content followed, incorporating characters like Black Panther and Spider-Man, but it didn't do enough to bring more people in. Had this been more successful, it was suggested that this would be the start of a gaming universe of interconnected Marvel games, but it looks like Insomniac's our only hope of that happening. Speaking of which, Insomniac's Spider-Man. Announced in 2016 at Sony's Electronic Entertainment Expo, the Wallcrawler would be a PS4 exclusive featuring a free roam New York to swing around in. When released in September 2018, it was met with rave reviews, critical acclaim, and even award nominations. It spawned a spin-off for Miles Morales, a PS5 upgrade, a sequel which is due out in October this year, and a line of expensive hot toys which I'm currently hunting down and, if I'm being honest, hopefully going to use this video to fund. Marvel vs. Capcom. This is a series of video games that was developed by Capcom that started in 1996 with X-Men vs Street Fighter, and I said I'd happily fight the winner. And over the years has had 8 entries in total, with the series having estimated to have sold around 10 million units as of 2021. ABC Marvel shows. Running at a similar time as the Netflix Marvel shows, a few series were launched by ABC as an attempt to expand the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The first of these was Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which ran for 7 seasons and followed a resurrected Phil Coulson and a small team of agents whilst investigating cases in the wider universe. It maintained a modest viewership until the show ended, but I rarely hear anyone saying it's a must-watch. Set in the 1940s, the second show ABC launched was Agent Carter, which followed Hayley Atwell's Peggy Carter as she works alongside Howard Stark in the aftermath of World War II. This one only ran for 2 seasons before being cancelled, despite a heated campaign to keep the show going in spite of low viewership figures. There was also the Inhumans TV show, but that's its own spot on this iceberg. Secret Wars. Now, there's 2 Secret Wars, and I've not sure which one this iceberg is referring to. The first goes by a full name of Marvel Superhero Secret Wars, was a 12-issue crossover between May 1984 and April 1985. It saw the Beyonder transport the most popular Marvel characters to Battleworld to fight it out. It's remembered fondly even today and gave us Spider-Man's black suit and everything else that spawned as a result of that. The second Secret Wars was a 9-issue event that took place between May 2015 and January 2016, and it was written by Jonathan Hickman. There are a number of similarities to the original, but this one had wider multiverse ramifications, such as the Ultimate Universe merging with the main 616 world. The Netflix Marvel TV universe. To expand the Marvel Cinematic Universe, 6 series were debuted on Netflix that featured darker, more street-level heroes. These were Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and the Punisher. There was also an 8-episode team-up called The Defenders, which for some reason just didn't feature the Punisher. Across the 6 shows there were 13 seasons, but unless it was Daredevil, the hype fizzled out the longer it went on, and slowly, each one got cancelled. Once the rights reverted back to Disney, the show started to appear on Disney+, with Charlie Cox's Daredevil already making a few appearances in other MCU properties. There's also been rumours that Jessica Jones and Punisher are also going to make their debut, and there's also been a Daredevil Born Again series that's been announced. But with all this writer's strike stuff, I just don't know what's happening with that. The 90s animated shows. Over the years, there's been a number of animated series, and we'll probably touch on some of the specific ones in different tiers. Pretty much every decade has some form of show going on, and as a kid in the 90s, I had some of the best, such as X-Men the animated series, Spider-Man the animated series, Fantastic Four, Iron Man, that weird MTV CGI show. Wait, that's later on in this video. But these animated shows vary in quality over the years, so it's kind of potluck. But there's still a few that have stood the test of time, and honestly, X-Men the animated series has one of the best intro themes. Civil War, and yeah, we're doing another company-wide crossover, but this one's probably the most well known. It lasted for 7 issues between July 2006 and January 2007, written by Mark Millar and illustrated by Steve McNiven. This saw the Marvel Universe divided, as the Superhero Registration Act had heroes and villains siding for it or against it, with Captain America on one side of the argument and Iron Man on the other. It had a massive impact on the comic scape, even for a few years after. It introduced the Iron Spider suit, which, yeah, is pretty much my favourite, and it even spawned a, let's just say not so popular sequel, The Dark Phoenix Saga. Credited as one of the first major and most important stories in X-Men history, in 1980 The Dark Phoenix Saga took place between issues 129 and 138 of the Uncanny X-Men. It saw Jean Grey turn against a team as she unleashes the Phoenix Force, which would become a staple of the Marvel Universe moving forward. The ending is one of the most powerful in Marvel history, and I'm mostly saying that with the memory of the animated show in my mind. And there have been 2 attempts at bringing this storyline to the big screen, but both failed. Marvel eras. Over the years, there have been different eras of comics for Marvel to signify the general tone and standards that were going on during that time. The Golden Age encompasses a timely Atlas comic runs that focus around World War II, so you've got the Namor, Captain America, and Defender series that symbolise this time. The Silver Age started with the Fantastic Four in the 60s, and although people might have different opinions, it's widely regarded as having ended when Lee and Kirby parted ways on the same title in 1970. The Bronze Age followed on from that and carried on up until Secret Wars in 1984. This time period saw a shifting in tones, with the Comics Code Authority really starting to lose its control, and more titles becoming comfortable with sequential storytelling. Next up, and ironically named the Modern Age, this started nearly 40 years ago, and after this is where the eras become a bit murky. I'm using MarvelGuides.com, who classify the end of the modern era as going up until 1997, but during this era it could be classed as the worst time for Marvel in terms of sales. We did also see them experiment with different events like the Infinity Trilogy and the Clone Saga. However, the Heroes Reborn era was when all the biggest characters were back at Marvel, and the Thunderbolts were also thrust into the limelight. It was a time when Marvel was trying to re-establish themselves and also the brands after nearly collapsing completely and also facing bankruptcy. And this ran up until 2004 when Avengers Disassembled kicked off what I refer to as the Bendis era. And you can say what you want about how the rest of his career went, but this time at Marvel was my jam. When you had titles like the New Avengers, Mighty Avengers, Secret Avengers, and Avengers The Initiative, which bled into huge company-wide events such as House of M, Civil War, Secret Invasion, and ended after the Heroic Age in 2012, which is also when Bendis left the Avengers titles. There's not many more of these eras left, so don't worry. But 2012 kicked off the Marvel Now era, which came with new branding and all new number 1s for the biggest titles. Jonathan Hickman was writing the Avengers books, which was the centre of everything that was happening, and kept escalating all the way until Secret Wars, which collided the Ultimate and regular Marvel universes together. And you'll notice at the time between these eras is getting shorter and shorter, and that's because Marvel loves a relaunch. Which brings us to the all new, all different branding, where they pushed the boat out by doing stuff like Civil War 2 and Inhumans vs X-Men. So no idea what was new or different. But all the characters you knew and loved were now swapped out with a different person. But since 2018, when the majority of books got relaunched again, it's been a bit of an undefined era, and who knows what waits in the future. Ultimate Universe. In the late 90s, in response to declining comic book sales, Marvel decided to create a separate timeline set away from the main 616 universe, due to the 60-year continuity being a barrier for many new readers. The Ultimate Universe was then started in the year 2000, featuring fresh reimaginings of the biggest characters from the very beginning. The first title released was Ultimate Spider-Man, and to me, and also to many others, this was the pinnacle of this universe. It was my first ever comic, and I've even done a video talking about why I think it's just the best. X-Men was the next big name, followed by the Ultimates, which was this universe's version of the Avengers, and then later on the Fantastic Four joined the mix. However, what originally started as an answer to convoluted messes became a bit of a mess of itself, with events like Ultimatum serving as a reboot of sorts, before it was merged/destroyed in 2015 during Secret Wars. Although whilst I've been doing the script for this video, Jonathan Hickman's kind of brought it back with the Ultimate Invasion. Excelsior. This is a slogan that became nearly as famous as Stan Lee himself, but he came up with this phrase because all the other ones that he tried, like Nuff said, were being imitated by his competition. So he wanted something that was difficult to spell but still had a hidden meaning, and when translated, the word means higher in Latin. The Marvel Method. This is a style developed in the 60s by Stan Lee, as he had so many ideas for stories but not the time to fully flesh them out. A synopsis is drafted up by the writer rather than a full script, and then it's given to the artist to expand on. Once done, the drawn pages are returned to the writer so that dialogue can be added that fits the illustration. This does mean that the artist is more free to bring what they want with just a loose guideline, but some critics claim it means the writer is actually doing little creating and the artist pretty much does all the work. However, it has its place in the medium, and it's also being utilised beyond just Marvel. The Incredible Hulk TV show. This CBS series ran for 5 seasons between November 1977 and May 1982. Bill Bixby starred as Bruce Banner, and bodybuilder Lou Ferrigno was painted green in the first live-action rendition of the Hulk. The series is responsible for making the Hulk a household name, along with giving us that sad song whenever Bruce walks down a road. Fantastic Four 2015. And I'm just gonna assume it's about the complete mess that this was. But to keep the rights from reverting back to Disney, Fox had a certain time frame that they needed to get a new Fantastic Four movie into production, or Fant 4 stick as the poster would lead you to believe. Things looked promising early on. Josh Trank, the director of the criminally underrated Chronicle, was picked to lead the movie, and it was to be a darker reboot of Marvel's First Family because for some reason, everything just needed a dark reboot during that decade. Miles Teller was cast as Mr. Fantastic, Michael B. Jordan was the Human Torch, Kate Mara was Sue Storm, and Jamie Bell was the Thing. But with Josh Trank having a distinct vision and the studio having a different idea, what we got in the end was a complete mess that barely made its estimated $155 million budget back. There hasn't been a Fantastic Four movie since. Josh Trank went on Twitter to try and give his side of the story, but that likely contributed to the poor reception, and at one point it was rumoured that 20th Century Fox was going to sue Josh Trank because of it. And despite the worst efforts, Fox did lose the rights to Disney, and now the Fantastic Four will be making their MCU debut as part of Phase 6. Punisher logo controversy. And I always try to avoid getting super political on this channel, which is ironic considering some of the other topics on this video, because there'll always be some conspiracy nutjob who won't listen to what you're actually saying and just hear what they want to. And I learned that the hard way the last time I sort of had to mention this topic. But the Punisher's iconic skull logo has been adopted by many different groups in the real world, including law enforcement, members of the military, me when I wear my Punisher hoodie at the gym, and also by rioters and those that were protesting at Capitol Hill. But in response, Marvel decided to change the logo during Jason Aaron's 2022 run, and there's no word yet on when or if it will be changed back. Oh wait, no, they just got rid of Frank Castle. Blade and its importance in superhero movies. This Wesley Snipes 1998 movie should be tier 1. Unfortunately, some people have forgot about it. But this movie was released at a time when Marvel Comics wasn't the household name that they are today. New Line Cinema was taking a risk on the property about the Daywalker, a half-human, half-vampire turned superhero who aimed to take down Deacon Frost. The movie did surprisingly well, grossing $131 million off a $45 million budget. It also spawned 2 sequels, one of which was directed by Guillermo del Toro, and it also gave me one of my favourite lines in cinema history. And because of its success, this allowed other studios to have faith in superhero movies again. And it's interesting to theorise how different the landscape would be without Blade, despite him not getting the credit he deserves. There is a planned Blade movie for the MCU, but it's been met with delays, and I just don't really know what's happening with it. Jim Shooter. Although he's written many titles over the years, including Secret Wars 1 and 2, Jim Shooter is also famous for being Marvel's 9th editor-in-chief, and oversaw some of the most important titles during the 70s and 80s, such as Miller's Daredevil, Claremont's Uncanny X-Men, and Simonson's Thor, and was a key figure in helping Marvel develop a decent reputation and bringing titles out on time. Wait, the next one on this list says the Mad Dog Comics OPB discount codes. Like, yeah, actually, it's a good job that they're on here, because if it was that you wanted to pick up any books that are mentioned in this video, and you want them for a little bit less whilst also supporting this channel, because that is the only way that videos like this are possible, then I'd definitely recommend checking out the channel's sponsor, Organic Price Books. They've got great packaging, fast shipping, and amazing customer services, and if you use code WOOFWOOF, you'll get $2 off your order. And if you're ordering 3 or more books and you want them to be delivered together, make sure you use code WOOFWOOF, ship it together for 5% off your entire order. Don't worry, you can just copy and paste them from the description down below, and you can use these codes as many times as you like. Okay, we're at tier 2 now, so we can actually see the iceberg. So for this one, I thought I'd talk about the characters and teams. Starting at the top, we're going to go with the ones that most people probably know about, and then the later that we get into this tier, we're going to get into some of those more obscure ones. We've also got different variations, and I also thought I'd throw in obscure character traits in here. But in the comment section below, if you want, why don't you play along and write down how many you knew already, and what is the most surprising one for you. And you can do that for all the tiers, I'm not just limiting it to tier 2. The Illuminati. Assembled after the Kree-Skrull War, the Illuminati were first revealed in issue 7 of Brian Michael Bendis' New Avengers. It's a secret group that was started by Iron Man, who wanted to bring together a member who could represent the major groups within the Marvel Universe, to exchange information and hopefully prevent greater disasters. Tony Stark represents the Avengers, Mr. Fantastic on behalf of the Fantastic Four. I'd have opted for Herbie. Charles Xavier for the X-Men, Black Panther for Wakanda, Black Bolt represents the Inhumans, and Doctor Strange is there because he's all magic and shit. They're responsible for decisions such as shooting the Hulk into space, which resulted in World War Hulk, and pulling the strings during Civil War, and they made their MCU debut, sort of, during Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Thanos and Mistress Death. Yeah, they're basically the Kanye and Kim K of the Marvel Universe. Comics Thanos originally had a similar goal to his MCU counterpart, but a very different motivation. Translation, he wanted ass. And to be fair, I'll be back in a minute. Over the years, Thanos has seeked to love, destroying planets and races to try and impress her. In the past, she has resurrected him, and also manipulated situations just so that he'd pursue her. And you know, I was once a dumb teenager, so I can relate. Gwenpool. As part of a variant cover campaign across a number of titles, a series of Gwen-based amalgamations were created following the success of Spider-Gwen. For Deadpool's Secret Wars issue 2, Gwenpool was created but never featured in the actual issue. But seeing how many people were cosplaying as a character, Marvel commissioned a backup story for it, along with a holiday special, which then led to her getting her own ongoing series, along with being a regular character in the Marvel Universe. And it's just crazy thinking how that all started with a variant cover. The one above all, first appearing in Fantastic Four issue 511, and created by the man himself, Mark fucking Waid. The one above all is effectively God and the highest creative force in all of existence. Their only weapon is love, and they live in the House of Ideas. They have cropped up a few times since their creation, including during Al Ewing's run on the Immortal Hulk. A-Force. First debuting in 2015 during Secret Wars and created by G. Willow Wilson, this was an all-female spin-off of the Avengers that included characters like Captain Marvel, Medusa, and She-Hulk amongst others. The first issue was the 6th best-selling comic for the month it was released, and received mostly favourable reviews for the 5-issue run. The team was brought back in 2016 during the all-new, all-different era, with a series that lasted for 10 issues this time, but the sales continued to dwindle to the point where some releases weren't even breaking the top 100 best-selling, and despite writer Kelly Thompson promising that the series was just going on a brief hiatus after issue 10, no new issues have been released since. However, there was a scene in Avengers Endgame which is a subtle nod to the all-female team, and I would argue how Captain Marvel and Scarlet Witch alone could probably stop Thanos, but this video is probably already long enough. Pet Avengers. And I'll tell you one thing, I wouldn't mind petting them. Another offshoot of the Avengers, but this one is easily the cutest. First joining up for a 2009 4-issue miniseries called Lockjaw and the Pet Avengers, after the dog of the Inhumans gained possession of the Mind Stone and assembled a team of fellow super animals, including Throg, Lockheed, Aunt May's powerless dog, Zabu, and a few others, to find the remaining stones. They haven't had many appearances, but in 2010 they found themselves in a battle against the Avengers after they accidentally helped Fin Fang Foom. But now that Disney owns Fox, if this team assembled again, I'd like to see Spider-Pig. Young Avengers. I've already done a video talking about both rosters of the Young Avengers if it was that you wanted a more detailed description, but they first debuted in 2005 and were led by Iron Lad, who was a younger version of Kang the Conqueror. Especially in the first roster, each member is just a younger version of an existing member of the Avengers, so instead of Captain America you've got Patriot, instead of Hulk you've got Hulkling, but honestly the original series by Alan Heinberg and Jim Chung is way better than I thought it would be. This isn't just some kind of gimmick team, and it even had a phenomenal crossover with the main Avengers called the Children's Crusade. The team also had a relaunch in 2013 with some of the members being swapped out, and it was written by Kieran Gillen and illustrated by Jamie McKelvey. Isaiah Bradley, first debuting in the premiere issue of Captain America Red, White and Black from 2003, it's revealed that during World War II there were multiple test subjects that were attempting to recreate the Super Soldier program, one of which was Isaiah Bradley. Selected because he was African American, Bradley was one of the only subjects to survive, as the trial was largely a failure. Despite doing a few missions as the urban legend of Black Captain America, his contributions during the war went largely unnoticed. Although he did receive praise from the likes of Nelson Mandela, Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X, his grandson Eli joined the Young Avengers as their version of Captain America called Patriot, and the character featured in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Excalibur. This is a spin-off team from the X-Men that was created by Chris Claremont and Alan Davies and debuted in the 1980s. And yep, my British bias is why I added them on here, as they're often based in the UK and have Captain Britain leading the team. Throughout the years, members of the X-Men have teamed up with them, and they have solidified themselves as an important part of Marvel's acknowledgement of the UK. Superior Spider-Man. After learning that he had little time left to live, Otto Octavius devised a plan to switch bodies with his greatest enemy. And in case you didn't know, it's Spider-Man. This was part of Dan Slott's run for the web slinger, and it spawned a new series in 2013 called The Superior Spider-Man, which I really had a great time with when I reviewed it recently, and I definitely recommend checking out. And it saw Otto take on the identity of his foe to use his intellect to find a way to become a better hero. And yeah, I can't lie, this series is way better than it sounds like it should be. And you can now get that entire run in one beautiful omnibus, which I only have thanks to the channel's European sponsor, Comics Bugle. So if you like the sound of organic price books and you wanted a European equivalent that gives you free shipping and free gifts with every order, then this is the only place that you need to go. And why don't you do yourself a favour, save a bit of money and support the channel at the same time by using the code WOOFWOOF for 3% off all books that aren't already in a sale. And I do want to throw Comics Bugle a big thank you for supporting the channel whilst I've been on this hiatus. But on top of that, the Superior Spider-Man's also had a second series, and he's also coming back for a one-shot this October. Kamala Khan's powers. Due to her inhuman heritage, the comic Ms. Marvel has a variety of different abilities, such as super strength, elongation, which is similar to Mr. Fantastic, size alteration, accelerated healing factor, and she can also change her own appearance. But when she debuted in the MCU, she was also given the ability to manipulate energy and light. At first it was theorised that this change was because there was too many similarities with Mr. Fantastic, which would make his MCU debut a little less, well, fantastic. But producer Sana and Monarch confirmed that this wasn't the case, and the change was made because of how they wanted to tell their story. The two Human Torches. Johnny Blaze of the Fantastic Four is hardly an obscure character, especially since he's been played in movies by two of the most handsome men of all time. What, don't judge me? But the original Human Torch dates back all the way to 1939, in Marvel Comics issue 1 when it was published by Timely. He was an android that went by the name Jim Hammond and was part of the Defenders. When he's flamed on, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between he and Johnny, but due to the rising prominence of the Fantastic Four, Jim has taken a backseat, although he can be briefly seen in the background of Captain America the First Avenger. Green Goblin's first appearance. Although he's now famous for flying around on his Goblin glider, when he was first introduced in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 14, he flew around on a rocket-powered broomstick. This only lasted for his debut, and because of how goofy it looked, I would have been okay if this became a regular part of his arsenal, but there was additional conflict between Lee and Ditko over the Goblin's true identity. Stan wanted to keep it a mystery so it later could be a big reveal that it was someone Peter knew, whereas Steve felt that wasn't representative of how life is, in a comic series where a teenager gets superpowers after being bitten by a spider. Fortunately, the decision was made to make the Green Goblin Norman Osborn, as clues had been planted since his debut. Hulk is demonic. The Devil Hulk first appeared in the year 2000 during Paul Jenkins' run on the character, but he rose to prominence during Al Ewing's 2018 series. It is still an alter ego of Bruce Banner, and it's also the physical personification of all the resentment that he feels from the rest of the world. His form is different from the mainstream Hulk design Frankenstein, but he still possesses most of the same abilities. Werewolf Captain America, Capwolf, a sore subject for longtime Captain America fans and pretty much the biggest blemish in Mark Gruenwald's legendary run on Steve Rogers. It was during the 90s, which should probably explain everything, when it felt like the big two publishers were doing whatever gimmick they could to shock readers and hopefully drive up sales. Capwolf first appeared in issue 405 after Nightshade injects him with Wolf Serum. The arc lasted until issue 408 and it doesn't appear to be a permanent ailment since Steve hasn't appeared as a wolf much since. Unless the LEGO games count. The one below all. Well, if there was one above then there must be one below to balance it out, but the one below all debuted in the 4th issue of the Immortal Hulk and is a living personification of destruction and hate. It has been referred to as Satan or the devil and resides in the below point, which has also been referred to as hell, so the odds are kind of stacked against him not being the devil. Oh, he's also part of the same entity that's the one above all. I just thought I'd mention that here. I'm definitely not filming this months after doing the voiceover. Taskmaster can't swim. Yep, the self-proclaimed world's deadliest mercenary has the exact same weakness as me. Wait, does that mean he can't ride a bike as well? And I wasn't just some kind of broken kid? But despite possessing photographic reflexes and being able to mimic anything he sees, he learned the hard way that he was unable to swim when he tried to replicate a dive. And it probably explains why you never see him going after Namor. Next Wave. This is an elite anti-terrorist team assembled by HATE, which is an abbreviation that stands for Highest Anti-Terrorist Effort. They debuted in January of 2006 and were created by Warren Ellis and Stuart Immonen. They acted as an ultraviolet parody of other Marvel groups but existed within the same universe. It's one of the only notable examples of a high-profile comedy superhero series, but unfortunately the team hasn't been seen since 2007. X-23's first appearance. Laura, the character who most people might know now thanks to Logan, often gets remembered as a product of the comics. However, her first appearance was in August 2003, during the 11th episode of the 3rd season of X-Men Evolution, which predates her first comic appearance in Nick's issue 3 that was released in February 2004. And I wonder how that affects first appearance collectors. The third Summers' brother. So we all know Scott Summers, who's Cyclops from the X-Men, and also Alex Summers, who's better known as Havoc. But there's also Vulcan, whose real name is Gabriel Summers, who was introduced during X-Men Deadly Genesis, and is an Omega level mutant with the ability to manipulate, control, and absorb energy, which, let's be real, isn't too far of a stretch from the abilities of his brothers. Thor's God Blast. This is a power that Thor can unleash, and it's a concentrated, amplified blast of Thor's entire life force being channeled through Mjolnir, that was first used in 1969 against Galactus, and depending on what story you're reading, it has been said to be the most powerful attack within the Marvel Universe. In the past, he's used it against the Black Winter, the Celestials, and Juggernaut? That last one feels a bit mean. The level at which the power emits has been increased and decreased depending on the story and the writer, meaning it's up for debate if there's anything comparable in the Marvel Universe. But regardless, you do not want to be hit by it. Ben Grimm turns normal every year. Thanks to a serum created by Valeria, who's the daughter of Reed Richards and Sue Storm, Ben Grimm can revert from his rock-like form once a year, which was established during Hickman's run. And it's also the only time that Ben ages, meaning that he can continue to live for millenniums, and once a year he gets to experience what it's like to be a regular person. Omega the Unknown. True to his name, this is a relatively unknown and obscure hero within the Marvel Universe who debuted in 1976. Steve Gerber, one of Omega's creators, wanted to write a story that wasn't just about the title hero, and more about a 12-year-old called James Michael Starling. The plot of this is so convoluted to try and coherently sum up, but Omega is the last surviving member of a dying alien race, and when James is sleeping he can see the adventures of Omega. His parents are also robots, and Omega tends to show up when he's in danger. However, the original series was cancelled abruptly, with the plot being left unresolved. Gerber intended to wrap things up in the Defenders, but was then later fired, and the Omega character was killed off as a weak conclusion to it all. However, in 2007, novelist Jonathan Lethem wanted to revitalise the character as it was a childhood favourite of his. Gerber was initially annoyed at the use of his creation, but then warmed to the idea when he was speaking with Lethem. The 10-issue series received critical acclaim and awards, but still didn't bring the character to the forefront of Marvel, although he can be seen in the background of an issue of Tom King's Vision. The Human Fly. This is a little-known Spider-Man villain who debuted in January 1976 in the 10th annual of The Amazing Spider-Man. His real name is Richard Deacon, and he was a criminal who was shot and left for dead until he convinced a scientist to save his life. This was after he overheard a conversation with J. Jonah Jameson where he said that he wanted to create his own superhero, and Deacon was adamant that he should be the subject. His DNA is imprinted with that of a housefly, and in case it wasn't obvious, creating your entire persona after the natural prey of your greatest enemy isn't isn't the smartest idea, as he's quickly taken down by Spider-Man. He has appeared a few times over the years, even joining up with the Sinister 16, but I don't think he's joining the ranks of Doc Ock, Green Goblin, or Venom anytime soon. Oddly enough though, there is a second human fly from Marvel who debuted in his own self-titled series only 1 year after Richard Deacon first appeared. This guy kept his identity unknown and had a book that ran for 19 issues that was created by Bill Mantlo. He's based on the real-life stuntman Rick Rojat and was often seen helping to protect charities, even if he gets mistaken by Spider-Man as a villain of the same name early on in his career. Like seriously, why was the name the Human Fly so in demand in the 70s? Mad Dog. Let's just address the elephant in the room. My channel is not named after this character, that would be crazy. Instead, it's named after the voice in my head that talks to just me. But Robert Baxter, also known as Buzz, first appeared as Mad Dog in the Defenders issue 125. His powers are a result of cellular augmentation and bionic engineering by Roxxon and the Secret Empire, and gives him super strength, animal-like senses, and enhanced jaw muscles, and other animal-like powers that help him as a villain. However, these same experiments also turned him insane, so maybe I do have something in common with him. Brute Force. This was a team that first debuted in June 1990 that ran for 4 issues. It was made entirely of animals wearing cybernetic suits such as a dolphin, kangaroo, and a lion. The most famous member as weapon 2, a squirrel that was enhanced to have claws similar to Wolverine. But despite the fact that this series sounds hilarious, the team hasn't been seen since the 90s and some of the members have died. There are 2 characters called the One Above All. So we spoke before about the One Above All being the highest form of creation and responsible for creating everything. However, there is a second character that goes by the same name, who was said to have been created by the Celestials and therefore can't be the same as the original One Above All, and I have no idea which one of the One Above Alls is above the other. The Crimes of Sue Storm. She may be the female figurehead of the Fantastic Four, but that doesn't mean that she's got a clean slate. Whilst teaching an English class in the second issue of Marvel Knights 4, to get them to all behave, she highlights that she could turn all of their clothes invisible with just a thought. Which, and this might be an unpopular opinion, is a weird thing to say to a classroom of teenagers. But don't believe that that was just a one-off, because in Amazing Spider-Man issue 657, she finally had to answer for her crimes. And that's because she was caught pantsing the Frightful Four in a public park. And when the police finally came to arrest the villains, they also had to keep a cell empty for Sue. And I'm just wondering, does she have to declare this when she's trying to ensure the Fantastic are? Four-Brush Man. This character was originally created in 1955 as a bit of an inside joke by Stan Lee. He's from Earth 665 and first debuted as Irving Four-Brush in Snafu issue number 1 as an employee of Marvel Comics. In the 1967 satirical series Not Brand Ek, Irving showed up in the premiere issue as Four-Brush Man, who became the mascot of the series as a wannabe hero that had no real powers except for Four-Brush vision, which is the ability to project a hell of the victim's own choosing onto themselves, but that came later on in his journey. His costume consists of a red outfit that has an F on it and a pot on his head, which was inspired by his Aunt Mayhem, who slammed it onto his head in a fit of rage. No idea if this guy's due to make an MCU appearance. Communist Red Skull. There have been a few who have taken the Red Skull identity since World War II, but the one that often goes overlooked is Albert Malik. He debuted back in 1953 in Young Men issue 24, which is honestly the worst title I've ever heard for a comic, but he was a Soviet spy that went undercover as a Red Skull to try and steal Hitler's plans for a weapon that the Soviets wanted for the Cold War. So despite being the poster child of National Socialism, I have to say that instead of, you know, I think I've already pretty much guaranteed to break some of the monetization rules despite working on this video for months already, so buy some merch. But despite his appearance, he was actually a communist. However, Albert did die back in the 80s, and unlike nearly every other character, he hasn't been revived. Thor can warp time. It's one of the lesser used functions of Mjolnir, but it has the ability of chronokinesis, which means it's an object that can travel through time. This is done when Thor spins it faster than the speed of light, causing the fourth dimension to be opened. And it sounds like a really useful ability that was used more during his journey into Mystery Days, but doesn't get seen as much now. Namor was the first flying superhero. Yep, out of any of the big comic publishers, Namor the Submariner was the first ever hero to showcase the ability of fly during his second ever appearance in 1939. This is despite the fact that Superman debuted the year earlier, as his flight ability was added in later. Firestar's debut. Firestar, a character that I already feel doesn't have a big enough popularity to begin with, has made a mark over the years fighting alongside teams such as the New Mutants, X-Men and Avengers. Her first canonical comic appearance was in May 1985 in the pages of Uncanny X-Men issue 193, but her actual debut was in the 80s cartoon Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, and she was created because the writers originally wanted the Human Torch, but couldn't because of an issue with the rights. How many times have we heard that one now? Elf with a Gun. This is the genius alias of Melf who, and this might be hard to believe, but he's an elf with a gun. Apologies to anybody who wanted a violent version of the Will Ferrell movie. He debuted in April of 1975 in the 25th issue of The Defenders, and was run over by a truck in the 46th issue of The Defenders in 1977, and joins the ranks of Uncle Ben and Captain Marvel as some of the only characters whose death has been permanent. There's a Marvel character called Iceberg. It also seems like there's two versions of this character. The one in the comics pretty much seems like the reverse of the Human Torch. His real name was Jack Pierce, and he was part of Fantastics. He debuted in the Avengers The Initiative Annual from December 2007, and he's only appeared in a handful of issues. And there was also a New York crime lord named Iceberg who appeared in the 90s animated series and worked for Kingpin. Oblivion. This is a cosmic entity and one of the overarching antagonists in the Marvel Universe, who is often erroneously seen as an aspect of Lady Death. Although unlike her, he embodies non-existence rather than mortality, and is dedicated to destroying all that exists. And yep, I copied that from Wikipedia. He first appeared in issue 1 of Iceman from 1984, and has also appeared in Quasar, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Thor. Combo Man. This was a character created by Mark Grunwald and Hector Collazo, who debuted for a single issue in January of 1996 in his own self-titled series. And if you thought some heroes had dumb origins, then strap yourself in, because Rick Wilder got his powers when he was caught up in an explosion that was caused by AIM in his school laboratory. Because he was carrying a variety of Marvel comics and combos-based snacks, which, if you're in the UK, they definitely are real because I checked. He has the powers and abilities of a variety of Marvel heroes, but also has all of the weaknesses. His resemblance is a hodgepodge of those characters, and he can also only access his abilities through eating combo-baked snacks, which I imagine just isn't good for you. The character and one-shot special was created as part of a partnership between Marvel and Eagle Snacks, and I can't lie, it got me interested in them, so job well done. Okay, we're getting into tier 3 now, and this is just above the water, and I thought I'd fill this one with different comic storylines from throughout the years. There is a kind of order system, so that I've tried to rank the most popular ones at the beginning, and the later we get into this tier, there'll probably be a few more obscure ones. Secret Invasion, another event, this one back in 2008, that saw the Skrulls invade the Marvel Universe. It was written by Brian Michael Bendis and illustrated by Lionel Francis Yu, and it ran for 8 issues between June 2008 and January 2009. And I'm gonna do another cheeky plug because I reviewed it last year as part of my season of events. It's also the title of an upcoming Disney Plus series as part of the MCU, which does take inspiration with the Skrulls, but I don't think it's going to be on as wide of a scale as the comic event. Clone Saga. Now this is mostly referencing one of Spider-Man's most controversial and despised storylines, which ran between 1994 and 1996, but the first clone of Spider-Man debuted in the 70s. That clone went under the name Ben Reilly, who re-emerged during the 90s event, which was a decision made by Marvel as they wanted a character-focused big storyline that could rival titles such as The Death of Superman or Batman Nightfall. Initially, it wasn't supposed to go on for as long as it did and was meant to end with The Amazing Spider-Man issue 400, but when sales increased, writers were told to keep it going and more titles were thrown into the mix. Despite the backlash at the time, it has since seemed to endure and cultivate some nostalgia, with the Ultimate Universe doing their take on the storyline, and even Miles Morales getting his own Clone Saga. World War Hulk, another event and one that addresses the issue of Hulk being off planet for Civil War. It took place over 5 issues between May and November 2007 and spawned countless tie-in series, and only about 3 of which are worth reading. After being shot into space by the Illuminati and the incredible planet Hulk, which I definitely recommend reading, Hulk returns on the warpath and will take on anyone in his way. It's pretty fun, written by Greg Pak, who has a vast amount of experience with the Hulk, and has John Romita Jr. not at his worst on the art. One More Day. This is one of the most hated Spider-Man stories, and the 4-part conclusion of J. Michael Straczynski's run. There was a ton of interference from editor and fellow Spider-Man writer Joe Quesada, who wanted to dissolve the marriage of Peter and MJ so that the character could be returned to his roots. To do that, Aunt May is shot, and to try and save her, Peter makes a deal with Mephisto to save her life, but it's in exchange for his marriage. Despite Aunt May being about 2,000 years old, he takes a deal and their marriage is erased from history. Some elements of the story were adapted into Spider-Man No Way Home, but even today the storyline is a point of contention for Spider-Man fans. But for being honest, most Spider-Man fans really seem to hate Spider-Man. King in Black, a 5-issue event that ran from December 2020 to April 2021. It was also the climax to Donny Cates' run on Venom, which I recently reviewed, so you might want to check that out. And this event saw the Marvel Universe fend off a symbiote invasion led by Cull. And yeah, I still don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. The Infinity Trilogy. These were 3 intergalactic events that took place across the Marvel Universe in the 90s. It started with the Infinity Gauntlet in 1991, was followed by Infinity War in 1992, and concluded with the Infinity Crusade in 1993. With each subsequent entry entry, increasing the number of tie-ins and decreasing the level of quality. However, it's still one of the biggest series of events in the company's history, and many elements were borrowed for the MCU. X-Men events. In the same way that we spoke about certain Spider-Man centric events, the mutant side of the Marvel Universe has had plenty over the years, including ones such as Fall of the Mutants, Inferno, Age of Apocalypse, Mutant Massacre, and countless others. These often primarily involve the Uncanny X-Men title, but also include the other X-Family books such as the New Mutants, X-Factor, sometimes you get Excalibur, and a few others. The Kree-Skrull War. Okay, so I touched on this during the Illuminati bit, but this was one of the first big, impactful multi-issue storylines for the Avengers, which took place between issues 89 to 97 between June 1971 and March 1972. It was written by Roy Thomas and illustrated by Neil Adams and the Buscemi's. It told the story of an intergalactic war between the Kree and Skrull races, with the Avengers getting caught up in the middle, and is still remembered today as one of the greatest and most important storylines for Marvel Comics in the 1970s. Demon in a Bottle, probably the most iconic Iron Man storyline of all time, and it was poorly adapted into 2010's Iron Man 2, but it featured Tony Stark's battle with alcoholism in the wake of a variety of different scandals and conflicts. It was written by David Michelinie and Bob Layton, and took place between issues 120 and 128. And my favourite scene is where Stark's so drunk that he forgets to open a window before flying through it. Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, a one-shot that was published in August of 2012 that was written by Cullen Bunn and illustrated by Dalipor Talajic. Apologies if I pronounced that incorrectly. It's not set within the main continuity, and as the title suggests, Deadpool goes about killing the Marvel Universe. It's entertaining and dumb at the same time, so I'd recommend it. Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe. This is pretty much the same setup as what I said for Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, but this one was written by Garth Ennis and illustrated by Doug Braithwaite, published in November of 1995. But it's a different take on the Punisher because instead of the origin story that we all know and love, Castle's family are killed when they're caught in the middle of a battle between the Marvel superheroes. This sends Frank on a revenge mission which sees him, as the title might suggest, to kill the entire Marvel Universe. It's a fun read and included within the Marvel Knights omnibus, so I'd definitely recommend checking this out. Captain America Hail Hydra. There is a comic series under this name which was released in 2011, but let's be honest, this entry, it's probably talking about the Nick Spencer run. The world was sent into a frenzy in May 2016 when Steve Rogers' Captain America issue 1 was released, all because of that final page. Hail Hydra. The internet blew up, which honestly was a nice distraction from all the regular political talk that was going on back in 2016. Idiots sent death threats to Nick Spencer, and I just knew that this was going to be part of some bigger story further down the line. It's comics after all. However, this storyline did carry on for a while with the emergence of Hydra Cap, which led all the way up to Secret Empire, which was another universe-spanning event but with Captain America at the centre. Marvel Swimsuit Specials. This was Marvel's annual parody of Sports Illustrated that ran between 1991 and 1995. It featured pin-ups of the most famous Marvel characters sporting some very of the time looks, and had some huge names working on this, including Mark Silvestri, Adam Hughes, and Jim Lee. It garnered both praise and criticism, and is still being dissected today, and like most things that are made for enjoyment these days, feminists complained about it whilst ignoring the fact that both male and female characters were featured. Although, I've had a look through a few of these issues, and did I just skip over the Professor X pages, or? Marvel 1602. This is an 8-issue limited series that started in November 2003, and it was written by Neil Gaiman and illustrated by Andy Kubert. It reimagines some of the major Marvel characters as if they were to exist within the Elizabethan era. Those with powers are declared to be witch-breed, and the heroes that haven't been burned at the stake have to rally together to prevent the destruction of the world. The first issue was a highest selling comic for that month, and it received consistently high praise for the entire run, despite being labelled as an extended What If. Original Sin. Yet another event, this one from 2014, and it ran for 9 issues. It was written by Jason Aaron and illustrated by Mike Deodato, and had the gimmick of characters within the Marvel universe being confronted with a secret from the past, following the death of the Watcher. There were only a few of actual consequence, such as Captain America realising that the Illuminati had wiped his mind, Hulk learning that Stark had tampered with the Gamma Bomb from his origins, and Stark learning that doing that whilst drunk actually prevented Bruce from dying. Other characters had lesser revelations, like J. Jonah Jameson remembering that he fired someone over discovering an article that he'd written when he praised Spider-Man as a wrestler, and Lockjaw remembering the location of a big bone that he buried. You don't really see many people listing this as a great Marvel event, but the gimmick was fun whilst it lasted. interested. Nick Fury's Secret War. This is an often forgotten early 2000s Bendis event that took place across 5 issues between April 2004 and December 2005. The art was done by Gabriel Dell'Otto and sees Nick Fury assemble a covert team with Captain America, Spider-Man, Wolverine, Daredevil and a few others, as he tried to infiltrate and overthrow Latveria without causing an international incident. The series was met with so many delays that House of M, which is another event that was written by Bendis, was published a year after Secret War began and it ended before the 5th issue was released. But it is credited as the first major event of this era, so it deserves a place on the list. No More Mutants. This is the famous line spoken by Scarlet Witch during the climax of House of M, an 8-issue event that was published in 2005. Having altered reality to envision a world where Magneto rules, but having realised that this didn't solve the problem that they originally had, she takes the extreme action of wiping out all but a fraction of the mutant population. And I can't lie, this event is phenomenal, so check it out for yourself. But the phrase No More Mutants would set the trajectory for the X-Men books from that point on, and the line has taken on a life of its own in the years since. The mystery of the Red Hulk. In 2008, to kick off Jeff Loeb's run of the Hulk, a Red Hulk appeared and started a mystery that was both hotly debated and also quite obvious in hindsight. And I can't lie, I really enjoyed this run. It's such dumb fun. It's just watching the Red Hulk pretty much punch through everyone in the Marvel universe. So if you're looking for something that's not trying to make you question your own existence, then this one's definitely for you. But the reveal was held back for 2 years until issue 22 when Thunderbolt Ross was shown to be the Red Hulk. Although yeah, it is kind of common knowledge now with the character having worked with the Thunderbolts and the Avengers, but for those 2 or so years it was just fun being a part of those message boards. Amazing Spider-Man issue 96. In 1970, when this issue was first released, it was unheard of for a big title to go against the Comics Code Authority, which was a form of regulation and something like a seal of approval to parents that were wanting to buy a book for their kid. However, President Nixon's administration asked Stan Lee to make a story with an anti-drugs message. Although PSAs on similar topics had been published in the past, Lee didn't want to make it a story that lectured fans and instead wanted to find a way to craft it into the story. Due to this, the Comics Code wouldn't approve the book, which was seen as a death sentence back then, but Marvel went ahead with publishing it anyway. It was the first time something like this had happened, but the book shocked everybody and instead exceeded sales expectations, which caused the Comics Code to revise their rules and also allowed other titles to risk losing their approval in favour of darker storytelling. The Interdimensional Council of Reeds. First revealed in Fantastic Four issue 570 that was written by Jonathan Hickman in 2009, Reed Richards of Earth 616 learns that the Reed Richards of all other realities came together to combine their intellect of the various universes to solve pretty much any problem. Infinity Gauntlets are aplenty, and the idea was riffed on in Rick and Morty, which is ironic because more people today probably know about the Council of Ricks than the thing that inspired it in the first place. Gwen Stacy's affair with Norman Osborn. This was part of the Sins Past storyline that was written by J. Michael Straczynski and took place between issues 509 and 514 of the Amazing Spider-Man series in 2004. Roughly 7 months before her death, Gwen had a secret affair with Norman Osborn because she pitied him but somehow found that attractive. Wait, why did that not work for me? And she secretly gave birth to twins as well. All of this was kept from Peter, and MJ only knew because she was sworn to secrecy, and it only comes out because one of the twins, Gabriel, breaks onto the scene as a Grey Goblin. This is still one of the most hated Spider-Man storylines of all time, and I haven't heard anybody try to justify it. Phoenix is now Thor's mom. During Jason Aaron's 2018 run of the Avengers, issue 42 to be exact, the Earth's mightiest heroes try to capture the Phoenix Force. But once face to face, Phoenix refers to Thor as a son and explains how her and Odin had a fling a million years before Christ was born, leading to Thor's conception. Yeah, a bit of an odd one. Sentry is the Void. And I am probably gonna butcher the explanation on this one, but the Sentry was a character who debuted in the year 2000, and it was established that he had existed throughout the Marvel Universe, but due to a cataclysmic event, all recollection of him was lost. Whereas the Void is an entity of darkness and death capable of destroying the entire universe that bonds itself to the Sentry, but it only exists because the Sentry is here. So when Robert isn't the Sentry, the Void is kept at bay. It became a plot device that was used a handful of times throughout the 2000s and 2010s, but I always just found him and his story needlessly convoluted, so maybe I'm not the best guy for this one. Deadpool had the symbiote before Spider-Man. Despite not making his first appearance until the 90s, timeline-wise, Deadpool did host the symbiote just before Peter Parker. Revealed in Deadpool's Secret Wars issue 3, and no, I didn't stutter, Wade is introduced to the machine that gave us a symbiote and quite likes it at first, until he realises it can hear his thoughts and by proxy means that he can break the fourth wall. And it does just make you wonder how Marvel history would have changed if he gave Peter a heads up. Tony Stark's tumour. In issue 6 of the Ultimates, Tony Stark reveals to the newly assembled team that he has an inoperable brain tumour that's slowly killing him. However, it eventually grew to have its own consciousness, so Stark gave it the name Anthony. However, there was also an Infinity Gem in Stark's head, so when when Reed Richards was trying to remove it, Anthony was lost in the process, which, considering it started as a tumour, that doesn't sound like much of a loss. Madcap and Deadpool's head. Madcap is a villain who first appeared in Captain America and loves to manipulate minds. Just before Secret Invasion, Madcap and Deadpool had a fight which caught the attention of Thor and caused the two to be electrocuted. Because Madcap was nowhere to be seen, everyone presumed that he was dead, but he lived on in Deadpool's head in the form of a suggestive white caption box until 2013 when the pair were finally split. Spider-Man Power Pack Anti-Child Abuse Special. This was released in September of 1984 and was produced for the National Committee for the Prevention of Child Abuse, who actually went on to produce 3 issues with Marvel, and each one looked at a different form of abuse. The issues were given out for free, and I honestly have no idea how to figure out if these were successful. Punisher became black. During an issue of the Punisher's first ongoing run in the 80s, he was beaten violently whilst in prison, which caused his face to be disfigured. Using this to plot an escape, he visits a plastic surgeon who gets to work on Frank Castle and fixes his wounds, but also turns him black. The reveal at the end of issue 59 didn't last for long, but it would have been amazing if social media existed back in these days, just so that we could see the reaction. And honestly, I don't know what Frank can expect when he clearly went to the same plastic surgeon that they had at the beginning of Saints Row 2. Tier 4, and we're just getting beneath the surface. So this is where I thought that a lot of these things might have been forgotten about over the years, and the theme here is going to be non-comic related Marvel media stuff. So we've got different types of movies, TV shows, maybe some video games that might have been really popular when they were first released, but time catches up with us all and some of these have been forgotten along the way. And I can't lie, I think this tier mostly turns into Sam Raimi's stuff. Fantastic Four 2005 and 2007. Yeah, there's more of these. These 2 movies were directed by Tim Story and were part of the Fox distribution slate. Chris Evans, who is now more famous for playing Captain America in the MCU, starred as the Human Torch. Jessica Alba played Sue Storm. Ian Gruffudd, who must get major points for playing his own name in Scrabble. And Michael Chiklis played the Thing. The first movie, released on July 8th, 2005, made $333 million against a $100 million budget, which was enough to grant it a sequel which came out on June 15th, 2007, subtitled The Rise of the Silver Surfer. However, this wasn't as successful, bringing in just over $300 million against a $130 million budget, and these are okay films, they're nothing special, I really like them growing up and I probably just have nostalgia for them, but the Galactus Cloud is still dumb. Ghost Rider movies. 2 movies were released where Nicolas Cage played the Marvel character Johnny Blaze. The first was released in 2007 and made $228 million against a $110 million budget, which was enough to get a sequel in 2012 subtitled The Spirit of Vengeance. I felt this one was quite enjoyable, but I haven't watched it since it was first released, but despite it having a reduced budget, estimated to be around $75 million, it only managed to make about $132 million and was the last entry in the franchise. But for some reason when I think about these movies, I always remember that the first was being used to advertise the power of Blu-ray, and I still think they're both worth a watch even if you just want a bit of a laugh. Activision Spider-Man games. If it wasn't for Insomniac, I'd be sitting here saying that some of these games that came out in the 2000s were the greatest Spider-Man games that we've ever played. And there's been so many Marvel-based games over the years, it could probably be its own video. We are going to touch on a few later on, but to speed things up, I've just lumped these all together. But after acquiring the license, the first release was a classic Spider-Man PS1 game from the year 2000, and the Carnage Arc chase at the end still haunts my nightmares. In Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, Spidey was also a playable character, which just seems like a mode of transport that Spider-Man wouldn't bother with. From there, the releases came thick and fast, including tie-ins for the movies, and the phenomenal Spider-Man 2, which defined how web swinging should feel. There's the criminally underrated Ultimate Spider-Man from 2005, the often judged too harshly Spider-Man Web of Shadows, and the forgotten fun rides like Shattered Dimensions and Edge of Time. Their final release, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, was panned quite heavily, but it did pave the way for Insomniac to really define the wall crawler. Marvel games of the 2000s. Yeah, I'm just bundling the rest of these together, and sure, there have been Marvel games for nearly as long as video games have existed, but the 2000s had a variety of bangers, including Hulk Ultimate Destruction, X-Men Legends, and the Marvel Ultimate Alliance series. On top of that, you had a plethora of movie tie-ins, most of which were kinda awful, like the Fantastic Four and Iron Man games, but then there'd occasionally be a gem like X-Men Origins Wolverine. Either way, despite the varying levels of quality, games like these were a part of my childhood and integral to me connecting with Marvel Comics. The Spectacular Spider-Man. This one still hurts to talk about. Probably the best animated Spidey series, and the only hurdle to it is the 90s one, and I'm kind of biased on that front because that series is the only reason why I got into comics in the first place. But Spectacular ran for 2 seasons, 26 episodes in total between 2008 and 2009. It was originally planned to run for 5 seasons, but it was cancelled due to legal complications between Disney and Sony. Fan films. Over the years there's been plenty of fan films centering around Marvel characters. The earliest one documented on IMDb is The Green Goblin's Last Stan from 1992, but there's been so many and for a variety of different heroes. My personal favourite is Punisher Dirty Laundry, which managed to get Thomas Jane back in the title role and also had Ron Perlman, and recently there was a controversial one making the news called Spider-Man Lotus. Initially this did raise a lot through crowdfunding, but then one thing after the other was revealed about the people working on the project, to the point where nobody cared about the movie anymore and it released to a massive whimper. However, there's that many fan films that I'm half tempted to do a video where I sit down and watch some of these. The Punisher 2004. For as much crap as the 90s gave us, the 2000s really seemed to be the figuring itself out phase for Marvel movies. Take for example the Thomas Jane led version of The Punisher that also starred John Travolta. It was made on a budget of $33 million and only made back $57 million. And this may just be 11-year-old Marcus speaking, but this movie ain't that bad. Is it the greatest Punisher story ever told? No, but I still think it's highly watchable, and it's nowhere near as dumb as the 2009 Punisher Warzone. The Ramones Spider-Man theme song cover. In 1995, the punk rock band The Ramones did their own rendition of Spider-Man's famous 60s theme song, which I'm gonna just guess I can't even play a little clip of for copyright reasons. However, the song resonated so well that the Ramones kept playing it as part of the gigs, and it has featured in promotional material for some of the Spider-Man movies. Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. This is the first thing I think of when anyone uses the word shit show, and there's already been countless great videos on this musical theatre production based on the wall crawler, but to butcher this explanation, Tony Adams thought of basing a production on Spider-Man in 2002. He approached U2's Bono and The Edge to do the lyrics, and they agreed because Andrew Lloyd Webber made a sort of backhanded comment about rock groups. Can't lie, that's a weak villain origin. The first readings for the musical took place in 2007, and for context, all three of the Spider-Man movies had been released in the time it took for this to get from idea to reading, but the musical was rife with delays and issues, including one of the stunt actors almost falling to his death, meaning that the budget continued to spiral until it was at roughly $70 million before opening night, which finally happened on June 14th, 2011. However, reviews for this weren't great, and the cost to bring it to stage on Broadway greatly outweighed ticket sales once the initial hype died down. Disney purchasing Marvel happened during this time, and even they didn't want to get involved. Cancelled Deadpool animated series. In 2017, a 10-episode animated series based on The Merc with a Mouth was ordered by TV station FXX, and despite the unexpected success of the Ryan Reynolds movies, it wanted to have a distinct voice, and early footage that was released looked really promising. However, in March 2018, it was announced that the studio wouldn't move forward with the production due to creative differences, with rumours circulating that Donald Glover, who was one of the leads with the project, was too busy to work on it, but he denied this by sharing the finale script on his Twitter, so it's still not clear why this fell apart. The unreleased Fantastic Four movie from 1994, and at that time I would have been 1 year old. Not that that adds anything. And this just highlights that before Blade, Marvel really didn't have much luck at the movies, but this one was made with a low budget of $1 million by German producers who specialised in low budget movies. However, despite announcing a premiere, the release was halted suddenly, and it was later revealed that the movie was only put into production so that the company in charge could retain the rights to the Fantastic Four, and not have them default back to Marvel in a similar technique to what Fox had to do with the Josh Trank movie. There's a 2015 documentary called Doom that chronicles the production, which I keep meaning to watch but I never do, and if you've seen any of the production images from this version of the Fantastic Four, it will make you grateful for Fox's last attempt. James Cameron's Spider-Man. But long story short, in the early 90s, James Cameron was offered to make a Spider-Man movie with a $50 million budget. DiCaprio was signed on to play Peter Parker, with Bill Paxton taking the villainous role of the Green Goblin. However, because the original contract was based on the same one used for Terminator 2, Cameron had way more power than was necessary, which caused arguments, complications, lawsuits, and eventually made the company that acquired the rights, Carolco, have to declare for bankruptcy. This movie was also one of the factors that nearly pushed Marvel to go out of business. However, some elements of the script were used when Sony Pictures and Sam Raimi took over, and as interesting as this may have sounded, I'm gonna go against the grain and say thank God this didn't happen. Think about it, from all the Marvel movies that we spoke about from the 90s, the only good one was Blade. And the timeline is a bit murky, but what if this caused Cameron to lose focus on True Lies? What if his Spider-Man movie was as soulless as Avatar? And what if we had to have a trilogy of movies where Leonardo DiCaprio does his usual thing of just playing Leonardo DiCaprio? Yeah, said it. The Japanese Toei Spider-Man. Arguably the best Spider-Man, but then again, I am a little bit biased towards anything Tokusatsu. But in the 70s, Marvel licensed out their characters to Toei during a 3-year agreement that also meant that Marvel could use any of their characters, such as Super Sentai, in any book that they wanted to. Admittedly, not much came from this on Marvel's side, but Toei did produce what is now known as Japanese Spider-Man, a 41-episode series that was released in 1978. Spider-Man was now Takuya Yamashiro rather than Peter Parker, and he wasn't exactly a friendly neighbourhood Spider-Man. He kills, uses a machine gun, and even has a giant mecha, which honestly sounds like an improvement. You owe it to yourself to watch a few episodes, because It's an experience. Punisher 1989. Always surprises me how many Punisher movies there's been. I think I even forgot Warzone. This one was directed by Mark Goldblatt and starred Rocky IV's Dolph Lundgren as Frank Castle, with a budget of $9 million but only managing to gross $30 million. It saw the Punisher going up against the Yakuza and was not received well. However, in the years since its release, it's garnered a cult status. MTV Spider-Man. Now, I don't care what anyone says, no one's gonna convince me that this wasn't a great show. And yep, I haven't watched a single episode of this since I was 11. Released in 2003, this was originally intended to be a sequel to the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie and also an adaptation of Ultimate Spider-Man, but then was later declared to not be canon with either. Neil Patrick Harris from How I Met Your Mother voiced Peter Parker, and it saw the titular hero go up against villains such as the Lizard, Electro, and Kraven the Hunter. It was entirely computer generated, which my child brain thought looked great at the time. It was cancelled after just one 13-episode series, despite having high ratings, because MTV felt it didn't fit in with the rest of the programming. And judging from their output today, I think that means it just wasn't ridiculousness. Marvel Anime 2010. This was a collaboration between Marvel Entertainment, Sony Pictures Entertainment Japan, and a Japanese animation studio called Madhouse, responsible for acclaimed anime titles such as Death Note, Trigun, and One Punch Man. Together, they produced 4 12-episode animated series based on popular Marvel characters, Iron Man, Wolverine, X-Men, and Blade. And shout out for choosing Blade when you could have chose Captain America, Spider-Man, Hulk, or any of the more popular characters. The stories took place in Japan and aired between 2010 and 2012, with Warren Ellis helping with the writing. And I watched the one on Netflix and I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed this. So regardless of which tier this ends up on, give this a go. Captain America's Serpent Society. In 2014, for the third phase of the MCU, Marvel held a press conference where they announced the upcoming slate of movies. It's the same one that we spoke about earlier where the Inhumans was announced. However, the first movie that Feige announced was Captain America Serpent Society, and honestly, hearing the audience pretend they're hyped based off the title is just hilarious. It was only at the end of the event that Feige revealed that the true title was going to be Captain America Civil War, with the main actors walking out on stage, and honestly, even nearly 10 years later, I love watching this video. Iron Man Armored Adventure. Another animated series, but this one was a 3D CGI take on Tony Stark that ran for 2 seasons between 2009 and 2012. I never watched this as it was coming out, but all episodes are available on Disney+, and the premiere episode broke the Nicktoons network record for the most viewed original series, with an estimated 125,000 viewers. Given the time of its release, I reckon this was trying to ride that wave of popularity that would have been found after the Robert Downey Jr. movie. Phineas and Ferb Mission Marvel. Season 4, episode 22 of the animated Disney show featured a crossover with a variety of different Marvel characters, including Spider-Man, Iron Man, Nick Fury, and more. Many voice actors who have previously worked on Marvel characters returned to voice a guest appearance, and reviews for this seem good, but I've personally never seen this, and I still have no idea what either a Phineas or a Ferb is. The Superhero Squad Show. This is an animated series based on the Marvel Superhero Squad toy series from Hasbro. It ran for 2 seasons between 2009 and 2011 and was primarily aimed at a younger audience. A wide range of established Marvel characters featured throughout the show, including Captain Britain, like, how often does that happen? And Tom Kenny, who's most famous for voicing SpongeBob, lent his talents to big figures such as Iron Man and Captain America. Decapitated Captain America. It's not normal to have anything related to the MCU this low down on the list, especially for the most successful movie in the franchise, but the final battle against Thanos already has a cornucopia of memorable moments. Yet there was one thing that was left out that I think would have drastically killed both the mood and also Steve Rogers. Wanting the mad time-traveling Titan to have a big moment when he confronted the Avengers in the modern day, Thanos was originally going to walk through a portal and throw the decapitated head of Captain America at the feet of Earth's mightiest heroes. And I hope you guys appreciate me avoiding jokes about decapitation, because even I tried to avoid some of the low-hanging fruit. The Russo brothers went back and forth on this idea for some time, with some versions of the script confirming that this was an alternate Cap, and some thinking that this was the main universe one. However, I think we can agree that him wielding Mjolnir is a much better moment anyway. The Inhumans movie. In 2014, at the Phase 3 announcement conference for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a movie based on the Inhumans was announced, which was scheduled to be released in November of 2018. Other new properties that were revealed on the same day, such as Doctor Strange and Black Panther, went on to be a success, but the Inhumans had a more difficult journey. The film was taken off Marvel's production slate in 2016, but wasn't outright cancelled, which would have been tricky considering the species had already been introduced in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. The Inhumans were then in a state of limbo, being cited as a possibility for Phase 4. Then IMAX announced an 8-episode TV series for the team, and the first 2 were going to be released in September 2017 on both ABC's network and also in IMAX cinemas. The series did not do well, and people often forget that this was originally supposed to be a movie. Blade TV series. controversies. This was a short-lived 13-episode series which debuted on Spike TV in 2006 and centered around the Daywalker. It starred Kirk Jones as Blade and had a premiere that was watched by an estimated 2.5 million people. But unfortunately, it couldn't hold this number into the later episodes, and it seemed to fall into that love it or hate it category. It wasn't picked up for a second season, and Jeff Johns, who most people might know for all of the work that he did over at DC, did a fair bit of the episode writing and said that the cancellation was likely due to Spike TV not being able to keep up with the production costs of each episode. The Blade Trinity debacle. In 2004, the third movie in the Wesley Snipes Blade series was released, and it was a mess. It feels like it should be a direct-to-TV sequel, and especially because it only made $132 million against an estimated $65 million budget. Now, with everything that I'm about to say, remember to throw the word allegedly in there because there's so many accusations that I'm probably going to forget. But Snipes had issues with both the original director and also David S. Goyer when he was selected as a replacement. Because of this, Snipes became difficult on set, refusing to film certain scenes, only communicating with other cast members if he was referred to as Blade. Apparently, he called Ryan Reynolds a cracker, only responding to people in post-it notes, and bizarrely refusing to open his eyes in one of the final scenes so that they had to CGI it on. And it still somehow looked better than that eye at the end of Doctor Strange 2. Snipes denied the allegations, but multiple people who worked on it said it was the most difficult movie production that they'd worked on. Vin Diesel in The Inhumans. Although he's known in the MCU for getting paid millions to say 3 words, in 2014 Vin Diesel posted multiple teasers that he was signed on for the Inhumans movie, with one being a badly photoshopped image of him wearing a black vest with the words "Are you Inhuman" behind him, and another with a caption saying that Marvel must think he's Inhuman. However, nothing ever came of this, despite rumours that he'd play Black Bolt, and the role eventually went to Anson Mount. Unused symbiote suit. Another Sam Raimi entry. But this one is quite interesting, as the final design for the symbiote suit in 2007's Spider-Man 3 is pretty much just the regular suit with the saturation turned down. But they originally wanted to go with a different design that was bulkier and more in line with the comic original. Set photos of the suit have been released over the years, but producers 86'd the idea because he said that the latex made it look like it was part of an adult movie. And wait, I think I've seen that movie. Hostess ads. This was originally tier 1, but considering that most countries still have to import Twinkies, I thought that this one wouldn't be well known worldwide. But Hostess, the company that makes Twinkies, ran a total of 86 different stories between 1975 and 1982, whereby one of Marvel's heroes would encounter a foe in a scenario that could only be solved with one of Hostess's products. I read a few of these in preparation for this video, and there's actually quite a lot of charm to them. Funnily enough, these were illustrated by artists that were working at Marvel at the time, and from what I researched, a large majority of these were done by Frank Miller. They are easy enough to find online and definitely worth checking out, if not for the hokiness alone, but you know, as another reason to get some Twinkies. And I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of years from now, Marvel charges $150 for an omnibus of these, which I'll probably still end up buying. Marvel mashups. So these were a series of short cartoon sketches that aired on Disney XD and acted as filler between shows. They took older Marvel cartoons such as Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, the 70s Fantastic Four, and the 80s Hulk series, then dubbed over it. It's kinda like solid JJ short videos, but a bit more kid-friendly, and you can still find some of these Marvel mashups on YouTube. Howard the Duck led to the birth of Pixar. This was a 1986 critically panned movie based on the comedic Marvel character that absolutely tanked at the box office. It's considered one of the worst movies of all time, and George Lucas was an executive producer. He wanted the movie to be an animated feature, but due to contractual obligations and the fact that animated movies weren't considered to be moneymakers, it had to be live action. When intended to be an animated movie, Lucas wanted to use the Graphics Group, which is a subgroup within ILM that he owned following the success of Star Wars. However, when Howard was decided to be live action, Lucas had to sell the group and it went to Steve Jobs. A few years after the purchase, the Graphics Group was renamed as Pixar, which likely never would have happened had Howard the Duck been a success. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man in 9/11. Yep, another Raimiverse entry, but the impact that 9/11 had on the first Spider-Man movie can't be understated. Some of these changes were to the original poster, where you could see the Twin Towers in Spidey's eyes. The spirit of New York and its people is obvious on the bridge against Green Goblin. Spider-Man is seen in front of more American flags than Captain America, and the original promo had Spidey webbing up a helicopter of bank robbers between the two towers. And I can't remember if I'm getting this from the Weekly Planet podcast or somewhere else, but I once heard a theory that this was supposed to be the big reveal of Spider-Man in the movie. As we go from a scene where he's just learning his powers, a brief montage that feels very last minute, and then Spider-Man is just an established hero. And honestly, when I watch this movie back, I can see that being the case, and that the teaser trailer was supposed to be a part of the movie until 9/11 happened. David Hasselhoff Nick Fury. Is it just me, or does his eye patch look way too big? big. Regardless, Nick Fury Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. was a TV movie commissioned by 20th Century Fox that released in 1998, with a budget of $6 million that they hoped would have led to a full series. It was written by David Goyer and had none other than David Hasselhoff as the lead. However, the project was largely panned, despite Hasselhoff receiving praise for his performance, and it failed to draw in an audience as repeats of other shows rated higher than it when it premiered. Bruce Campbell was Mysterio. Is this just going to be a Sam Raimi tier? Bruce Campbell has a cameo appearance in the 3 Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, and when rumours started that a 4th movie was in the pipeline with Mysterio expected to make an appearance, it started circulating that Bruce Campbell would be Quentin Beck. This then became a theory that he'd been Mysterio in his 3 previous Spider-Man roles, but it wasn't until recently in 2022 that Raimi confirmed he did want Campbell to return for that role, but the movie was scrapped for the rebooted Amazing Spider-Man. Disc Wars. I can't lie, I'm probably going to end up watching a few episodes of this. Marvel Disc Wars The Avengers is a 51 episode anime series that ran between April 2014 and March 2015. It was produced by Disney and Toei Animation, and the premise was that Loki got hold of some new tech that Tony Stark developed called discs, which stands for Digital Identity Securement Kit. However, the Avengers that we know get trapped within these discs and fall into the possession of 5 kids. It doesn't sound as good now. The discs allow them to possess the power of those heroes, or maybe it's be possessed by the spirit of them. It's all very anime in the description, but the animation style looks clean. It even spawned a Nintendo 3DS game, and it has English dubs, so no idea why it kind of just faded into obscurity. 70s Spider-Man manga, published in 8 volumes between January 1970 and September 1971 in the pages of Monthly Shonen magazine. This is a retelling of Peter Parker's story, but set within Japan. It's not the same character as any of the other Japanese Spider-Men, and the teenager bitten by a spider this time is Yukimori. The only major difference in his origin is that he caused the death of someone rather than it being his Uncle Ben, and the title features some of his villains such as Electro, Lizard, Mysterio, and the Kangaroo. Of all the characters you could have chosen. Captain America 1990. This was a live-action movie of Steve Rogers that was made on a budget of $3 million, and when you see movies like this, it makes you realise how important Blade was. The film was supposed to be released in cinemas, but despite being completed, it was shelved for over 2 years and later released direct-to-video. I've never watched this all the way through, but I did see a video that the Nostalgia Critic did on it, and if I'm being honest, this looks like a fan film. Fred and Barney Meet the Thing. The title of this Hanna-Barbera cartoon from 1979 might be one of the first examples of clickbait, because the 13-episode series kept the Flintstones and the Thing separate from one another, except for during the title sequence. The Thing would get to 11-minute stories in each episode, with the remaining 30 minutes centering on Fred and Barney. It was one of the last cartoons to include a laugh track, and came about because Marvel owned the publishing rights to Hanna-Barbera properties and were printing comics based on them. Marvel Nemesis Rise of the Imperfects. This was a 2005 fighting game developed by Nihilistic Software that was available for the PS2, PSP, Xbox, GameCube, and Nintendo DS. Playable Marvel characters included Spider-Man, Captain America, Venom, Wolverine, and Daredevil amongst others. They were up against the Imperfects, a team of EA-created characters that no one's really heard of since this game, or during this game if I'm honest. It got a pretty meh response critically, and a lot of people complained about how overpowered the AI was, and it's just really fortunate that this game came out before everyone was just told to get good. Man-Thing 2005. And hands down, this is the pound for pound worst name for a character. However, in 2005, the obscure Marvel hero had a movie made that was directed by Brett Leonard. It was originally aiming for a theatrical release, but the estimated $7.5 million budget meant that it couldn't compete with the other movies that were coming out at the time, and instead premiered on the Sci-Fi Channel in April of 2005. However, despite some critics complimenting the CGI and the directing, the plot failed to stick the landing, and it garnered a 17% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And yeah, I'm British, so we say tomatoes over here. Captain America 1979. This was a direct-to-TV movie that was produced by CBS on a budget of $150,000. It doesn't seem to take a lot of inspiration from the comics, and features a Steve Rogers who makes a living as an artist, who gets caught up in an accident that causes him to be injected with FLAG, which stands for Full Latent Ability Gain, a serum that was created by his father. The majority of the movie mostly sees him driving around on his Captain America bike trying to stop a bomb, and it received a very mixed reception. Although it did get a sequel which was released in the same year, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Doctor Strange 1978. Oh my god, how many Doctor Strange movies have there been? I can't lie, this one doesn't look great, but it was a made-for-TV movie that was released in September 1978 on CBS. It was created with the intention of garnering enough support for a TV series similar to what they did for The Incredible Hulk and The Amazing Spider-Man. It was written and directed by Philip DeJoy, with Peter Hooton starring as Stephen Strange, and had what has only been described as an ample budget. However, it drastically underperformed in both viewership and critical reception, meaning they didn't get picked up and just faded needed into being this odd, obscure movie. Spider-Man 3 Editor's Cut. Wait, another Sam Raimi entry? Are you kidding me? But to coincide with the 10th anniversary of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3, an editor's cut of the movie was included with a specific collection of the 4K Blu-ray. It has all of the unused music from Christopher Young, and new scenes were added along with a restructuring of the story. I recently watched a great video on this, and I kinda want to check it out for myself, but if you're outside of the US, it's really difficult to know which release this is included in. Wolverine becomes Christian. In Season 3, Episode 18 of X-Men the Animated Series, the show delves into the religious beliefs of the mutant heroes. In a weirdly spiritual journey, Logan is given a Bible by Nightcrawler, who preaches that God is there for them if the person allows it. Although at first seeming annoyed by the gift, Wolverine is later caught praying by Rogue. The second season of the 1998 Silver Surfer. This was a 13-episode animated series that aired on Fox Kids between February and May 1998, and it had a cel-shaded look that mimicked Jack Kirby's style. There were plans for a second season, with 8 episodes having been written already, but according to Larry Brody, who created the series, it was cancelled due to a dispute between Marvel and Saban Entertainment, who were one of the production companies involved. As of today, none of the scripts for the incomplete episodes have ever surfaced, but it's interesting to wonder what it might have been. Captain America 2 Death Too Soon. Title must have been in reference to the franchise. Remember the Captain America movie we spoke about a few minutes earlier? Well, it did well enough to greenlight a direct-to-TV sequel that had a budget of $150,000, which I used an inflation calculator to check, and that is just shy of $1 million in today's money. There's no documented box office or viewership figures or even reviews for this movie. However, it is credited with inspiring the comics to give Steve Rogers personal vehicles. So does this mean that Chris Evans isn't the best Captain America? Dr. Mordred. During the 80s, Charles Band and his father Albert bought the rights from Marvel to create a Doctor Strange movie. However, pre-production took so long that they lost the rights before the movie could ever be released. But they'd already sank some money into it. How much? We'll probably never know because it doesn't look like it was declared. But either way, they went on to release a movie with a different name that was called Dr. Mordred. More surprising is that they called one of the characters the Monitor, and there was also concept art from Jack Kirby. This movie did not do well, and I can't imagine it made Charles and Albert any money back. And worst of all, it's not even remembered as a bad Doctor Strange knockoff, it's just not remembered at all. Before doing this video, I'd never heard of this movie, and I can't say that I'm rushing to watch it. Agreeable Grunt. In the Square Enix Avengers game, there's a number of accessibility options, one of which being subtitles and text-to-speech for the hard of hearing. Which is great so that more people can play this game that nobody wanted to play. And as nice as these features are, there are some unintentionally hilarious results, such as the Hulk's grunt of hello being subtitled as Agreeable Grunt, which is read out in the most monotone delivery possible.
You doing okay, Hulk?
Agreeable Grunt.
Superhero Squad Online. This is an online multiplayer game based on the Marvel Superhero Squad series that we mentioned earlier, and it was released on PC in 2011. It was meant for a younger audience, and I can't find a lot of reviews on this, but the server for the game was eventually shut down on January 11th, 2017. Thomas Jane in Spider-Man 2. Another connection to the Raimi movies, but in one of the final scenes where Mary Jane is running through New York to confess her love for Peter, you can see none other than Thomas Jane in the crowd. It was confirmed to be his Punisher character through the audio commentary, but due to rights issues between the studios, it wasn't allowed to be an official appearance, unfortunately. And even if it was official, it's cool, but it just kinda stands there. Batman vs Superman vs Captain America. Now, movie studios plot release dates years in advance, and there's many factors that must go into it, the biggest one being competition. In 2013, Marvel announced a bunch of dates for their upcoming third phase of the MCU. However, in January 2014, Batman vs Superman was delayed from its original 2015 date to the now highly contested May 6, 2016. A stalemate ensued with neither company wanting to budge. Marvel then announced that the date was being held for Captain America Civil War. Then, a few months later, Warner Bros. Moved BVS's release date to March 25th, 2016. However, they denied this was due to pressure from Marvel, and when have Warner Bros. Ever been dishonest? Surfing with the Alien. This is a 1987 album from Joe Satriani that features a cover with the Silver Surfer that was drawn by John Byrne. However, he did not receive any royalties for the image, and Joe had no idea who the Silver Surfer was. He must have used some 80s version of Google, and that was just the first image that popped up, and the title of his song was purely a coincidence. The Electric Company / Spidey Super Stories. This was a series of 5-minute skits that played as part of the series The Electric Company. There were 29 installments in total that were shown between 1974 and 1977. Marvel provided the rights to Spider-Man free of charge, something that you're not going to see happen today, especially if it's on a kid's tombstone, and due to when this was released, this version holds the distinction of being the first live-action Spider-Man. Avengers United they stand. Yeah, this one probably could could have been lumped in with the 90s animated series that we spoke about earlier, but this one's a little bit different because it was a short-lived series that ran on Fox between October 1999 and February 2000. For some reason, Cap, Thor and Iron Man only make cameo appearances, with Ant-Man and the Wasp now being the leader of the Earth's Mightiest Heroes. It was commissioned in response to the success of Batman Beyond, so everything had a bit of a futuristic vibe, but unfortunately the series couldn't gain any real popularity and was cancelled after 13 episodes. Hanna-Barbera Fantastic Four, widely known for their shows such as The Flintstones, Scooby-Doo, Top Cat and countless others, one of Hanna-Barbera production studio's lesser known titles is a 20-episode Fantastic Four series from 1967. The show received praise for its production, but due to the structure of the show, it couldn't delve into an overarching deep narrative similar to the comics. And fun fact, in Japan this series was known as Space Ninja Gomes. Spider-Man 1977, running for a total of 13 episodes between 1977 and 1979. This was a TV series that was shown on CBS and is the first full live-action show that centres around Spider-Man. The episodes were around 45 minutes each, and despite being a juggernaut on the ratings, it was abruptly cancelled after the second season because CBS didn't want to be typecasted as a superhero network, having already commissioned The Incredible Hulk and a plethora of other Marvel shows. And I find it odd that despite coming out the year before, technically being the first live-action full series, and even running for more years, the Japanese Spider-Man is remembered more by the general public than this one. Generation X 1996. The Generation X comic was a spin-off of the X-Men that launched in 1994, and within 2 years it was being picked up by Fox for a TV pilot movie. With a budget of $4 million and premiering on February 20th, 1996, it featured some of the comic characters such as Emma Frost, Banshee and Jubilee, but the series failed to make an impact despite its massive budget, as it ranked 72nd out of 108 in terms of viewership figures for that period. Australian Wolverine. During the 1989 animated TV movie The Pride of the X-Men, Wolverine was voiced by Patrick Pinney, and despite being Canadian since his inception in Giant Size X-Men, the Logan in this movie had an Australian accent. Probably not as much of a shock these days considering Hugh Jackman is also an Aussie, but according to story editor Rick Hoberg, this was an intentional change because of a fad that was going on during the 80s. And I'm not entirely sure if that's because of Kylie Minogue, but I feel like she deserves some of the credit. Oh wait, it was just because of Crocodile Dundee. And Logan had also been Australian in his 1982 appearance on Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, the 1991 Power Pack pilot. We spoke about Power Pack earlier, but in 1991 a TV show pilot was commissioned by New World Pictures in the hopes of getting a full series picked up. Originally aiming to get selected by NBC, it was passed on and eventually shown on Fox as a Saturday morning special. Although they had the same powers, the kids didn't wear costumes, and you don't hear a lot of people begging for a revival of this show. At one point in the year 2000, Power Pack was sold for a possible movie adaptation, and there have been rumours about their possible inclusion in the MCU. Tier 5, now we are really deep into the water, which is bad luck for me because as I mentioned, I cannot swim. But the theme here is going to be crossovers and alternate universes. So we might have little known meetups that got forgotten about, or even crossovers with different comic universes like DC and Image. The What If universe. This is an anthology series that began in 1977, where each issue took an established character or storyline and changed something about it so that the outcome could play out. I did a video a while back talking about some of my favourite concepts from the series over the years, and the MCU got its own Disney Plus animated show that followed the same concept, obviously with different scenarios. More often than not, they're just fun comics, and over the years I can guarantee that there's been something for everyone. Marvel 2099, an imprint of Marvel that was originally developed by Stan Lee and John Byrne and was supposed to be set 100 years from the publication date. The 4 launch titles were Spider-Man, Doom, Punisher, and a new character created by Stan Lee called Ravager. It was successful at first and rolled out to include the X-Men, Fantastic Four, Daredevil, and a lot more, but declining sales caused the imprint to be cancelled, and it's pretty much only Miguel O'Hara that survived. Marvel Zombies. Debuting in the Ultimate Fantastic Four series, the Marvel Zombieverse is Earth 2149, and as you can imagine, it's like the Marvel universe, but everyone's a zombie. It's had many series over the years, initially being written by Robert Kirkman, most famous for The Walking Dead, and the omnibus also recently got a reprint which will be a bit cheaper if you use those discount codes I mentioned earlier. Marvel Star Wars. The history of Marvel's time printing Star Wars comics chronicles all the way back to the first movie in 1977. They did a variety of original and expanded universe series, but after the original trilogy ended, the rights for Star Wars comics went to Blackthorn Publishing in 1987, and 3 years later were picked up by Dark Horse Comics. Countless Star Wars comics have been released between the two publishers, some of which were deemed as canon and others not. Yet when Disney bought Lucasfilm in 2012, Marvel once again had the rights to publish Star Wars, and rebranded everything printed so far as a Legends title so that it wasn't technically canon. However, since the acquisition, Marvel has launched multiple new series, one of which was Star Wars by Jason Aaron, and the debut issue was the highest selling single issue of that year, Marvel's Universe. Another one I'm probably going to butcher the explanation to, but this one's worse because I've actually read the original book. But Marvel's was a 1994 4-issue limited series written by Kurt Busiek and illustrated by Alex Ross, and it retold the key history points of the Marvel Universe from the perspective of a Daily Bugle photographer, and is widely regarded as one of the best books Marvel's ever printed. In 2021, Busiek continued this universe with the Marvels, not to be confused with the Captain Marvel movie, and the stories combine elements and characters from across the entire history of the Marvel Universe, and it all seems to be happening at the same time. DC crossovers. The most famous one is probably JLA Avengers, which was written by Kurt Busiek and illustrated by George Perez, and I've already spoke about the development troubles that this series had in another video, so I'd recommend checking that out. But over the years there has been the odd crossover between the two publishers, such as Superman vs Spider-Man, and if I had to put money on one of them, it's gonna be Superman. There's also been Batman and Hulk, and we've also had Uncanny X-Men crossing over with the Teen Titans. However, JLA Avengers was the last crossover between these two companies, meaning that it's been nearly 20 years since these worlds collided. Marvel Max. Now I can't start this without saying that the Max imprint is badass. Created in 2001, Marvel Max was intended for adults only and could tell grittier stories. It's given us some great runs over the years, such as Punisher by Garth Ennis, Alias by Brian Michael Bendis, and Fury, My War Gone By. However, it was criticised by Stan Lee himself for the level of grotesque violence and how it went against what he was trying to create during his time. But despite some success, the imprint kinda died out a bit, and seems to just be a logo that signifies it's a Punisher book. Old Man Logan Universe. Originally debuting in an issue of Mark Millar's Fantastic Four, the Old Man Logan universe takes place on an alternate Earth sometime in the future, whereby the world has been overrun by gangs led by famous Marvel characters. The Logan of this world first got a storyline during Mark Millar's Wolverine run, but then due to his popularity was brought back in his own storyline in 2015 during Secret Wars. He's also featured in the regular Marvel universe, and I think everyone should check out the Jeff Lemire run, Timely and Atlas Comics. These are the original companies that would later evolve into what we now know as Marvel. Timely started in 1939, which was founded by Martin Goodman, and printed titles such as Captain America and Marvel Comics, which included characters like Namor and the Human Torch, but it's the other one. This was dissolved and rebranded as Atlas Comics in the 50s, and carried on with the titles and characters that were printed before, but it also delved into more genre-based series, including crime, drama, westerns and romance. However, following layoffs and dwindling sales, it refocused and rebranded as Marvel Comics in 1961, which by comparison makes a company-wide relaunches not seem as drastic now. Marvel UK. And I'm not sure how many times I've said it in this video, or I'm gonna say it, but I really want to do a separate video on this topic. But in 1972, while seeing a gap in the UK comics market, which I can assure you is still kinda there now, Marvel launched a UK division which started with specific titles on popular characters such as Spider-Man, Hulk and Fantastic Four. And many huge names got the first big breaks over at Marvel UK, including Dave Gibbons, Steve Dillon, Grant Morrison and Alan Moore. As well, a variety of different intellectual properties were published through the company, such as Planet of the Apes and Transformers, but after a few years of poor sales, it was eventually folded into Panini Comics, and a lot of the titles they created have since been printed by Marvel US. Squadron Supreme Universe. The designation is Earth 712, but the team of superheroes known as Squadron Supreme were introduced in Avengers issue 85 back in 1971, and they were created by Roy Thomas and John Buscema. The team's story was fleshed out further in 1986 in a 12-issue miniseries written by Mark Grunwald, and the team is Marvel's version of the Justice League, with Hyperion being Superman, Nighthawk replacing Batman, and Power Princess in the role of Wonder Woman. They've cropped up a few times throughout the years, and this won't be the last time you hear them mentioned in this video. Unless you just stop watching this video now, then it probably will be. Amalgam Comics. We started in 1996, ran for a year, and was a collaborative publishing imprint created by both Marvel and DC. And all these titles were set between Marvel vs DC issues 3 and 4. It saw mashups between the two companies headlining the 24 one-shot issues, featuring characters such as Darklaw, which was an amalgamation of Batman and Wolverine, Super Soldier, a mashup of Superman and Captain America, and the Skulk, a unique cross between the Hulk and Solomon Grundy. And I have no idea where the rights lie for on this one now, but I hope there's one day an omnibus of this, because it sounds like the kind of gimmick I would fully get behind. Attack on Avengers. This was a one-shot manga crossover between Marvel and the Attack on Titan series, which included Spider-Man, the Avengers, and the Guardians of the the Galaxy. It was released in 2014 but has also been included in the Attack on Titan Colossal editions and also in Marvel's Secret Wars issue 0. It saw the Titans rise to attack Manhattan because, let's be honest, if it was Stoke-on-Trent being attacked, the Avengers would turn a blind eye. The story was pretty fun for a goofy crossover, and as it was a collaborative effort, Kodansha had the Japanese publishing rights, with Marvel having the American. The Marvel Invincible crossover. Robert Kirkman, the Image Comics partner known for writing The Walking Dead and Invincible, had a series over at Marvel called Marvel Team Up. And in issue 33 of Invincible, Mark is in a battle with Angstrom Levy, who can create portals to different dimensions. He sends Invincible through one, and on his return we see a web attached to him. What happened there is answered in issue 14 of Kirkman's Marvel book, which sees Invincible team up with Spider-Man in a battle against Doc Ock. And at the same time we see him roast pretty much the entire Marvel universe. So who knows, maybe this was the first sign of Kirkman's dislike for the company. Mangaverse. Officially designated as Earth 2301, which is also one of my pin numbers, and wait, why am I admitting that? The Mangaverse was a series of books that was released between 2000 and 2002. They featured the Marvel characters and the style of and utilising tropes from manga. Whatever that is, I'm not a manga guy. And besides a brief revival in 2006, this universe hasn't been revisited much by Marvel. Marvel's Transformers. But this was an 80-issue series that ran between 1984 and 1991. It followed the characters of the popular toy line and TV series and had quite a cult following, even still today. In the early 2010s, these were reprinted as part of the IDW Classics collection, but these are now long out of print along with the Marvel UK line. But with Image Comics recently picking up the Transformers license, who knows if these will be printed again? Star Trek crossover. This was a 1996 one-shot that saw the original crew of the Enterprise cross paths with the X-Men after they travelled through a dimensional rift that was created by Proteus. It was written by Scott Lobdell and had some big artists working on it, including Mark Silvestri and David Finch, and it was the first in a series of Star Trek titles that were printed by Marvel as part of the Paramount Comics imprint. However, because the publishing rights to Star Trek are now with IDW, and I really don't know a lot about this property, it's not certain if this can be printed again. Doctor Who crossover. Between 1979 and 1999, which, yeah, it's a lot of nines to say all in one go, Marvel Comics printed the Doctor Who magazine, which was written on the understanding that it took place in the regular 616 Marvel universe. Because of this, the Doctor could be seen in the same locations as some of the biggest Marvel characters. Additionally, there are a number of different universes that also have a connection with Doctor Who, but since Marvel UK dissolved, this hasn't manifested as a physical appearance, and only a reference or two from characters like Miles Morales, Clark and Lois in Marvel. But X-Men issue 98 from 1976 is credited as the first appearance of Clark Kent and Lois Lane within the Marvel universe. It's a proper blink and you'll miss it appearance in the bottom corner of a panel, but it's since been confirmed to be the DC characters. Other cameos in this issue include Stan Lee, Matt Murdock, Jack Kirby and Chris Claremont. Marvel Godzilla comics. Another IP that Marvel printed comics for, but this 24-issue series was printed between 1977 and 1979, and featured Godzilla within the main 616 universe, so there are appearances from the Avengers and Fantastic Four, and for Godzilla continuity, it takes place just after the Showa era. But as the rights for Godzilla are currently with IDW, these stories can be quite difficult to find. Marvel Ruins. Strange Brain Parts recently did a great video on this topic, but the Ruined universe is Earth 9591 and set apart from the regular continuity. It only lasted for 2 issues, was written by Warren Ellis, published in 1995, and created as a parody of Kurt Busiek's Marvels. It even had the same lead character of reporter Phil Sheldon, and it takes place in a world where everything that can go wrong does go wrong. So there's stuff going on like the adamantium in Wolverine poisons his skin, Xavier is a president of an oppressive government, and most of the Avengers are dead. However, making a series that is intentionally morbid and depressive for the sake of it didn't leave a positive impression on many, and when it does get brought up into conversation, although rarely, it's as one of the most unnecessarily grotesque books that Marvel's ever printed. Marvel's Alf Comics. This was a series that ran for 50 issues between 1988 and 1992 based on the popular TV character Alf. Again, it's from that era when Marvel were printing books based on other intellectual properties such as Transformers and Indiana Jones. It's garnered a cult following since it was cancelled, and when the end was imminent, the book itself took a critical viewpoint on Marvel itself and some of the people working there. Icon Comics. This was another imprint Marvel created in 2004, and always felt like this was Marvel's answer to Image, because it was a place where some of the biggest names working at the company could make their own creator-owned books. Powers by Brian Michael Bendis and Michael Omen was the first title printed, and some of the biggest books from the imprint included Criminal by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, and Kick-Ass by Mark Millar and John Romita Jr. However, despite some of the names that were working there, the imprint fizzled out until it was pretty much dead when Bendis left to go work for DC in 2017. Archie Meets the Punisher. This was a one-shot crossover between Archie Comics and Marvel that was released in August of 1994. Initially, this started as a joke suggestion when editors from the two companies were talking about possible crossovers, and somehow this idea gained traction all the way to it being published. The plot sees the Punisher being tasked to find a fugitive who's fled to Riverdale. The fugitive has a similar appearance to Archie, which means that the Punisher goes after him, and because Veronica wants to get back at Archie, she takes the fugitive to the school dance. When it was first announced, most people thought it was fake, but when it was released, it received praise, as despite the juxtaposition and personalities, both characters remain true to who they are. Big Hero 6 is a Marvel IP. Big Hero 6 was a well-loved 2014 animated movie from Disney, and even featured a cameo from Stan Lee. However, the concept itself is loosely based from a Marvel team that debuted in 1998. Full name Sunfire and Big Hero 6. They were first meant to appear in Alpha Flight, but then got their own miniseries, and it features characters such as Silver Samurai, Sunfire, and Baymax is still there too, although his appearance is quite jarring compared to his Disney counterpart. However, despite the film gaining massive popularity, the comic counterpart faded into the background. But every now and then you hear a rumour that they're gonna make a return. But with Marvel, if they were gonna do it, they would have done it by now. Punisher and Eminem. The crossover no one knew they wanted until it was announced, and then most people kind of forgot about it. But Frank Castle and Slim Shady, and yes, it's the real Slim Shady, all those other Slim Shadys, they're just imitating. Sorry, I had to. This was a one-shot written by Fred Van Lent and illustrated by Salvador LaRocca, released in June of 2009. Like any good team-up, it sees them fight for the first half and then become best friends in the second, despite Frank shooting quite a few of Eminem's friends. And also, people know who Eminem is, so I swear he should be on the run for murder now. It's a gimmicky yet fun concept, and hopefully a Boys to Men Guardians of the Galaxy crossover is on the horizon. Malibu Comics / the Ultraverse. This was a company later acquired by Marvel that was founded in 1986 and defunct by 1994. They're most famous for the Ultraverse line of books and one other particular title, but that's later on in this video, which was a universe where the characters got powers and were referred to as Ultras. And honestly, this company sounds like a mess behind the scenes, with them merging with a video game company that somehow ended up costing them $200,000 a month, and it only seems like Marvel acquired them because DC was interested, and that would result in DC having a bigger share of the market. Marvel did what they could to try and make this a success, including crossovers with some of the most popular titles, but sales just didn't improve. But despite some hints, a revival seems unlikely since it's rumoured that Marvel would have to pay the original creators 5% of any profits, which, unless I'm really bad at maths, means that Marvel would still get 95%, which seems like a decent amount to me. The Ideaverse. This is a multiverse within the multiverse that was established in November 1972, debuting in Supernatural Thrillers issue 2. All the real-world literary characters who inspired characters within the Marvel universe, such as Sherlock Holmes, Dracula, Robin Hood, and even the Little Mermaid, all live there and are stuck in a perpetual loop of repeating all of the most famous stories. And unfortunately, like most good things, it was ruined by Deadpool when he went on a quest to kill all heroes within the multiverse. Marvel vs. Capcom reference in Smash Ultimate. In the 2018 Switch game Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Ryu from Street Fighter is a playable character. However, it's mentioned that he's fought many competitors over the years, including cyborgs, mutants, and even superheroes, which is a nod to the Marvel vs. Capcom series that we spoke about in Tier 1, meaning there's the slimmest of slim chances that there's a universe out there where Thor beats up Luigi, and that's enough to keep me living. The New Universe. But the New Universe was an imprint of Marvel Comics that started in 1986 and had collapsed by 1989. There were some huge names involved in this as well, including Jim Shooter, Mark Gruenwald, Archie Goodwin, and Tom DeFalco. It was separate from the regular Marvel Universe and was a series of titles all connected together with their own continuities, fewer powers, and greater consequences for their actions. However, a lack of cohesion between the debut titles meant that by the end of the first year, 4 of the starting series were cancelled, and the remaining books dwindled into obscurity despite valiant effort from the creators. And honestly, there's so much more to it, so watch this space. Men in Black is a Marvel IP. Remember earlier when we spoke about Malibu Comics and how Marvel eventually acquired them? Well, one of their properties was Men in Black, a sci-fi series created by Lowell Cunningham that debuted in January 1990. But let's be honest, it's now better known for the Will Smith movies. And if we're being really honest, the Chris Hemsworth reboot is more well known than the comic. And it's impressive how huge the IP is worldwide, considering it only ran for 6 issues and it didn't really make massive waves within the comic industry. However, there are quite major differences between the movies and the comic, comics, such as the agency dealing with paranormal threats rather than just extraterrestrial. Zed never makes a physical appearance, the famous memory erasers don't exist, and instead witnesses are just killed. And probably the biggest difference, Will Smith isn't in the comics. However, despite Marvel still owning the property today, no new issues have been printed since the release of the first movie. The Rutland Halloween Parade, the unofficial DC crossover. This is an annual real-life event that's been held in Rutland, Vermont since 1960. However, the event itself has also appeared in multiple issues of various Marvel and DC titles, so this was the first unofficial crossover between the two publishers. As even though they may not have been seen in each other's issues, there is only one parade a year and both were in attendance. Freezer in the X-Men. In the one-shot issue, X-Men No More Humans, that was written by Mike Carey, there's a shot in front of the Xavier mansion where a brawl breaks out, and there's a character that has quite the resemblance to the Dragon Ball Z character Freezer. It's not been confirmed for certain, but if it is him, then he definitely has a good tan, but it's a fun little Easter egg, kinda similar to the time that Vegeta appeared in the Fantastic Four. Vegeta in the Fantastic Four. Might as well cover this now, but during the Chris Claremont and Salvador Larroca run of the Fantastic Four from the 90s, there's a blink and you'll miss it cameo from the Dragon Ball Z character Vegeta. The hair's identical, the armor plating is undeniable, and he's even got his arms folded like I've just failed to defeat him for the umpteenth time. And the cameo would have been longer, but apparently his show fee is over 9,000. Savage Dragon Skrull. In Nova issue 3 from 1999, there's a unique cameo as soon as the book starts from none other than Image Comics' Savage Dragon. However, it's revealed that he's actually a Skrull in disguise when he's been arrested by Nova, and nothing else really came from this, but it's a nice little nod. Welcome to Tier 6, and we are now in the depths. Yep, the days of the MCU being a topic are now long gone. And to match where we are, the theme of this one is going to get a little bit dark, because it's the controversies, the lawsuits, and just all the things that Marvel probably wants you to forget. And I can't lie, this was the most fun tier for me to research, so I really hope you enjoy this one. Miracle Man reprints. Easily one of my favourite ongoing jokes on this channel, Alan Moore, and yeah, I said his name this time, worked on a title called Marvel Man that was later renamed Miracle Man. And the whole story of this is such a mess that other people have already done videos on it. It was only in the last few years that the whole situation got somewhat resolved, but what didn't get resolved is Alan Moore's association with the character. Now, I like Alan Moore, and he also knows magic, so I don't really want to get on the wrong side of him, so I'm just going to blindly agree with whatever he says. But what Moore's problem with Marvel seems to be is with the rights surrounding properties that he worked on and developed, and how Marvel could expand on the characters or profit on his work without permission. It's a similar situation to his feud with DC over Watchmen and his disdain for adaptions. But long story short, any reprints of Miracle Man and also the Captain Britain work that he did won't say his name and instead just say the original writer, which must be confusing for anybody whose last name's Writer. New Warriors 2020 Backlash. If you know about this one, you'll remember where you were when this was announced, or bare minimum you're going to remember the comment section. For the 30th anniversary of the New Warriors, a new team and ongoing series was announced with a mix of old characters and new. Have a guess which caused the controversy. Do you think it was the fan favourites such as Thrasher, Fireball and Silhouette, or the newly created Trailblazer, B-Negative, Snowflake and Safe Space? This is one of the only times I can remember the entire comic community being united against pandering this obvious. At least it probably would have had it not mysteriously disappeared from the release schedule during the pandemic. Silver linings, I guess? The Deadpool-Deathstroke connection. The fan favourite character Deadpool was originally created as a rip-off of DC Comics villain Deathstroke. If the name Wade Wilson wasn't already too similar to Slade Wilson to prove it, they're both assassins, debuted against a teen team, have the same weapons, and it's even been admitted over the years by the original creators. Yet as a result of the movies, more of the general population know Deadpool, rather than the guy who is supposed to be a knockoff of. Jack Kirby's feud with Marvel. Nowadays, the legend who outcreate the Fantastic Four, Black Panther, the Inhumans, and countless other characters is remembered more for his contributions to the industry, but that wasn't without its struggle. It started in 1968 when Joe Simon entered litigation with Marvel over the ownership of Captain America, which Kirby was also involved in, but it ended with him signing over any rights that he had with the character. This worsened in 1970 when Jack grew frustrated at Lee's prominence within the industry despite the work that Kirby was doing, along with a lack of creative control and promises that were never fulfilled by upper management. This got even worse later on in the year when he was presented with a weird contract that included stipulations like he wouldn't ever be able to pursue legal action against Marvel. I don't know if I have to say allegedly at this point, but I'm just gonna say it to play it safe. Things continued to spiral, Kirby was dismissed for his input over the years, and he either needed to sign the contract or leave, which he did despite yearly earnings that were around the equivalent of $250,000 in today's money. He left to work for DC and created titles such as The New Gods, but I won't get into too much detail about this part, and I'll save it for a DC Comics Iceberg. you know, if you guys want to see that.
In 1976, Kirby returned to Marvel and created titles such as The Eternals and Devil Dinosaur, but by 1979 he had left again, following mistreatment, and the problems with Marvel didn't stop there, as he kept the majority of his original art, some of which were just given away or even stolen from warehouses. Honestly, the whole ordeal is insane and an overlooked part of Marvel's history. The Immortal Hulk issue 43, another heavy topic similar to X-Men Gold, but in February 2021, the 43rd issue of Al Ewing's The Immortal Hulk was released. Joe Fixit goes to a pawn shop, and the imagery in the background is framed in a way to display anti-Semitic messages. The backlash was immediate, resulting in Marvel altering the art in any reprints and digital copies, and Ewing himself released a statement saying that he was distancing himself from the artist.
The only thing that's more controversial with The Immortal Hulk is when anyone dares to say that this isn't the greatest series of all time. Seriously, just don't do it to yourself, even if it is correct.
MODOK Trump.
Yeah, who says comics are too political?
In the Spider-Gwen Annual issue number 1, which released in June of 2016, it's revealed that the MODOK of Spider-Gwen's Earth 65 is actually Donald Trump, known as MODOK, which stands for Metal Organism designed as America's King. And it's not just a lookalike so they can claim it's a coincidence, because it's actually named as Donald Trump. And fun fact, this savage roasting had absolutely zero impact on the election. Spider-Man's radioactive sperm.
Come on, you can't not laugh when you hear that sentence.
Spider-Man Reign was a 2006 limited series that was written and illustrated by Care Andrews, and I've never read this, mostly because of the radioactive sperm, but it sounds like someone trying to do a Dark Knight Returns for the Wallcrawler. It's set 30 years in the future after Spider-Man's retired and wants to return to crime fighting, Mary Jane's long been dead, having battled through cancer that was caused by prolonged exposure to Peter's radioactive sperm. But it's good timing on this one because I recently heard that they're going to do a sequel, even though nobody's been asking for it. Greg Land, the artist who photo traced adult movies.
And you know what, I want to clear up a misconception here because it annoys me. Greg Land isn't known for photo tracing adult movies. He's known for photo tracing all of his work.
But Greg Land is an artist who worked for Marvel over the years on some pretty big titles such as Ultimate Fantastic Four and X-Men, and he makes it no secret that he uses photography for his references, which was originally part of his charm, but he couldn't beat off the internet and he exploded in his face when the images were tied back to adult movies. Still, he continues to get work over the years and has been caught up in scandals where he's been accused of copying other comic artists as well, with the most recent obvious example being his cover of Aliens Omnibus Volume 1. It has sparked a debate on what is and isn't acceptable for photorealistic styles. Ultimate Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch.
They're a couple. Look, let's just get that out the way.
And when it comes to the Ultimate Universe, it's pretty much the only thing we remember about Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. They're still brother and sister, which is why Captain America had such a hard time believing it when he first heard during Ultimates 3.
And look, I know I'm an Ultimate Marvel apologist, but even I can't justify this one.
X-Men Gold issue 1 controversy. But the first issue of the second volume of X-Men Gold from April 2017 was illustrated by Audience Syaf, who snuck in references to the 212 and 51 on billboards and t-shirts, which relates to anti-Semitic and anti-Christian protests. In all honesty, I'm not really educated enough to talk about the history of that, and I don't want to get it wrong and offend anyone, but these illustrations went unnoticed until it was published, where it received backlash, prompting Marvel to terminate Syaf's contract and remove the imagery from all later printings of the issue. Avengers issue 200. This is widely regarded as the most controversial Avengers story. Carol Danvers, then known as Ms. Marvel, became pregnant with a baby boy that would age quickly and go on to assault her and become his own dad, all within the same issue.
And the boy's name was... What? Oh, come on. They named him Marcus. I already got enough problems with her name.
Yeah, I'm speeding through and massively dumbing down this story, and in all honesty, I've only ever read articles about it because, well, it's hardly made it to the top of my to-read list. The story is so reviled because of how poorly it handled such a sensitive subject that Jim Shooter, who was editor-in-chief at the time Avengers 200 was released, later went on to say he regretted letting it be published and apologised for it in 2011. Steve Ditko Objectivism.
Okay, this is another one you're gonna need to strap in for.
So Steve Ditko, the co-creator of Spider-Man, was a believer and follower of the philosophical belief system Objectivism.
And I know I was probably gonna butcher the explanation on this one, so I googled Objectivism for idiots, and it said that
Objectivism philosophy is the idea that there is only one objective reality, and that laissez-faire capitalism is the only system that recognises an individual's rights. In this philosophy, absolute reason and self-interest are also important, and because Ditko was known for aligning with it, over the years people have tried to see how this influenced his work, especially in the formative years of Spider-Man, such as believing that a hero shouldn't need to team up with other heroes, and when it did happen, he would make the other hero incompetent. It also meant that he was against the concept of protest, which meant that there were some scenes in Spider-Man where a protest was happening, but they were also trying to downplay it. And Ditko also found himself arguing with Stan Lee that Norman Osborn shouldn't be a supervillain if he's also a businessman. Wolverine issue 131. From 1998 and written by Todd DeZargo and Brian K. Vaughan, Wolverine issue 131 has a narration box that refers to Sabretooth as a K-I-K-E. The way this came about was because DeZargo was originally coming off writing the issue and Vaughan was taking over, who had originally scripted the line, "the assassin known as Sabretooth." Editorial staff changed this to Killer and scribbled it in the corner, and when the script notes were faxed across, it squashed the word and led to the slur being printed. Marvel recalled the issue, but a few batches made it into circulation, and it's become something of a collector's novelty. Even though I've seen slabs of this on eBay, which to me makes no sense because you're either going to have to break the slab to check, or just hope for the best. Ed Brubaker's royalties for the Winter Soldier. As part of one of the best Captain America runs of all time, Ed Brubaker did the unthinkable in 2005 by bringing back Cap's World War II sidekick Bucky as a deadly assassin the Winter Soldier. Although based on an established character, everything about his rebirth and new identity was all Brubaker's storytelling and Steve Epstein's art, and was so great that the MCU incorporated his character as well, making him the focal point of the second Captain America movie and the co-lead in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Despite having a cameo in the 2014 movie, Brubaker later revealed that he was paid more for that appearance than he got from royalties or residuals from the use of the Winter Soldier character. Although he accepts that he signed the contract that has been fulfilled, he can't help but feel sick when he sees his greatest contribution to Marvel raking in millions, but knows that standing in the background of a scene earned him more. Marvel tries to bury the Fantastic Four and X-Men for the Inhumans. During 2015, when the MCU was in full swing and the rights to the Fantastic Four and X-Men were still at Fox, a few sneaky things were done as an attempt to hurt the brand, and thus lower the value when the movies were released. Although it doesn't look like the Fantastic Four movie needed any help with that. However, in a surprise to everyone, Marvel cancelled the FF title at issue 645 in April, and it remained cancelled until it was relaunched in 2018. The X-Men were removed from merchandising, allegedly banning their inclusion on anniversary trading cards, which, considering they're all about not being discriminated against, kinda feels like discrimination. And they also edited a t-shirt that showed the famous cover to Secret Wars issue 1, but without any members of either team being present. Marvel instead tried to push the Inhumans higher in popularity to coincide with the upcoming project. The joys of hindsight. And even put them at the centre of an event where they were up against the X-Men. However, now that the movie rights have reverted back to Marvel, both superhero families have been relatively safe. The Ultimate Comics and cannibalism. Yep, getting all the advertiser-friendly buzzwords in this video. Since its inception in the year 2000, there's been a lot of instances of characters within the Ultimate Marvel universe eating other humans. And I hear you ask, is it more than it happens in the regular Marvel universe? Yeah, at least I'm assuming proportionally so if it made it onto this iceberg. First up, you had the Hulk, who threatened to eat people during a fight, and later was said to have ate 6 nurses whilst he was imprisoned. You also had the Blob eating the Wasp because he took Magneto's words literally, in that humans were pretty much the equivalent of an animal species to mutants. And Venom also enjoyed the odd human from time to time. Actually, it was a staple of the PS2 game, which now I feel bad for following through with. Even Spider-Man wanted a nibble of Captain America when he wore the symbiote, so who knows, maybe there was just something in the water in the Ultimate Universe. Marvel. Yeah, this one might be on one of the mid-tiers, but those who know about this 2002 limited series do not have anything good to say about it. Originally created to settle a bet between Marvel writer Bill Jemas and Captain Marvel writer Peter David, with Joe Quesada getting thrown into the mix for some reason. Marvel was created as a satirical take on the comic industry that was part of You Decide. This was an initiative where fans got to decide which title out of Captain Marvel, Ultimate Adventures, and Marvel got to survive cancellation, and it should go without saying that Marvel didn't win. The main character was called Kal-El as he travels back to 2002 just to comment on how weird the comic world is. But then for some reason, the 7th and final issue was just a submissions guideline book for how to send scripts to be published as part of the Epic Comics imprint. And you know what? After looking into this book, maybe I was a bit too harsh on Tyrese Gibson's mayhem. X-Men Doom Patrol similarities. So both Marvel's X-Men and DC's Doom Patrol centre around a group of superpowered characters who don't fit in with society or in the roster of established heroes, and find solace and family with one another when they're brought together by a leader in a wheelchair. Arnold Drake, the creator of Doom Patrol, has gone on record for saying that he thought Stan Lee copied him, as both debuted in 1963, with Doom Patrol being launched 3 months before Stan Lee's team. However, it's not clear if there was any plagiarism given the lead time that books need, but there have been been further odd coincidences between the two teams, such as them both getting revivals in the 70s and some of the same creators working on both books. Image parodied Marvel. To usher in the heroic age following Siege, Marvel relaunched a handful of books including the Avengers, New Avengers and Secret Avengers, each being teased with their own silhouette poster that would later be revealed. But Image Comics wanted a piece of the cake when announcing their roster for Robert Kirkman's Guardians of the Globe. Invincible and Bulletproof were announced first, and then later Spawn was added, which raised eyebrows. And when The Walking Dead's Rick joined the party, people really started to ask questions. But when Harry Potter and Obama were announced, it was obvious what was happening. Aunt May is Peter's real mother. In September 2003, Marvel printed Trouble, a series that ran for 5 issues as part of their Epic line, and no, I'm not talking about those thick trade paperbacks.
Honestly, this entire series sounds like a complete mess, so I might do a deep dive into it later on this channel.
But it tells the story of a 17-year-old May before she ever became Peter Parker's aunt. And in fact, this story reveals that she never really was his aunt, but instead his mother, due to her being a wild child with strict parents. Her unexpected pregnancy had to be kept secret, meaning that when she gave birth to Peter, she had to give him away. It should go without saying that this caused controversy, mostly because of how bad the story sounds, but also because there were debates going on as to whether or not this was canon, part of the Ultimate Marvel universe, or just a weird alternate universe story that exists for the sake of it. Kitty Pryde says the N-word.
Yeah, I'm not gonna get too in depth with this one.
The worst thing is, it seems like she's used it a few times, such as in God Loves Man Kills, New Mutants, and the Uncanny X-Men issue 196. I would explain what's happening in each scene, but a white guy explaining why another white person using the N-word sounds like a recipe for disaster that I'm not ready for, which sparked interesting conversations since, so have a look into this for yourself if you want to. Peter and MJ's baby from the Clone Saga. Peter and MJ got back together for the billionth time in Spectacular Spider-Man issue 220, and they solidified their reconciliation pretty quickly. Look, it happens. MJ fell pregnant and worried about what type of world she'd be bringing a child into, which temporarily caused Peter to retire, but it's fine because there were a lot of other Spider-Men during this time. MJ goes into labour in issue 418 of The Amazing Spider-Man, but the baby appears to die during birth, which neatly allows Peter and MJ to go back to the usual status quo, meaning that they probably break up every couple of issues. However, it was implied that the baby hadn't died and was instead bought by Norman Osborn. This was teased until issue 441, where the storyline was picked back up again, only for a few issues later to have the series confirm that the baby had died and was maybe killed by Green Goblin. And you know what, if this is why people dislike the Clone Saga so much, I get it. Spider-Man wasn't allowed on a 4-year-old's tombstone.
Well, I knew every entry in this video wasn't going to be a fun one, but this one just feels bad.
But Ollie Jones was a huge fan of Spider-Man who died of leukemia in 2019. His family put an image of Spider-Man on his tombstone, but was then contacted by Maidstone City Council on behalf of Disney and told to remove it. Disney allegedly, and in case you couldn't hear I was doing air quotes, said it was because he wanted to preserve the innocence and magic of their characters.
Because Peter Parker's known for having such an innocent life.
The headline made international news for a few weeks and even spawned a petition that garnered over 100,000 signatures. However, since then it doesn't look like there's been much news on this topic. Man-Thing Swamp Thing similarities. Quite a similar story to the X-Men Doom Patrol bit from earlier, but this time the shoe was on the other foot. Man-Thing first appeared in Savage Tales issue 1 from May 1971, created by Stan Lee, Roy Thomas, Jerry Conway and Gray Morrow, with Swamp Thing debuting in House of Secrets issue 92, which was released in July of the same year, created by Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson. Both characters were scientists who were developing secret formulas that were then used against them to morph into the heroes that we know. But even more bizarre is that Len Wein and Jerry Conway were roommates at the time when they were creating the characters. However, due to the close proximity of their debuts, no lawsuit was ever filed by Marvel. Makes a change. And the characters went on separate paths to the point where the similarities no longer matter. America Chavez 4chan letter. America was a 2017 Marvel series that centered around America Chavez and became a regular target of jokes on 4chan. And one user even sent in a letter to Marvel editorial staff mocking the praise they saw the title receiving, even comparing the America series to Tommy Wiseau's The Room. And let's be honest, nothing's getting close to that movie. And despite its obvious trolling, Marvel printed and responded to the letter in the 7th issue as if it was genuine fan praise. The black suit Spider-Man was fan-made. The fan-favourite symbiote suit that debuted in 1984's Secret Wars was actually an idea that spawned out of a competition that Marvel ran 2 years earlier, with the submission coming from Randy Schueller. Marvel wanted fans to submit new ideas for existing characters, and the black suit was intended to be a stealth version that was more durable and created by Reed Richards and the Wasp. Randy was paid $220 by Jim Shooter for the idea, but when you think about how popular the design is, and the fact that it spawned Venom and all the symbiotes, and how much merchandise there's been, this seems like a bit of a bad deal. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen issue 5. If you're interested in rare single issues, then the 5th issue of Alan Moore's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen should really catch your eye. We spoke earlier about Moore's feud with Marvel, but an advert was included in an early printing of the issue for a Marvel douche, which was an actual company at the time when this book took place. Fearing litigation from Marvel, DC Comics executive Paul Levitz ordered a recall of the issue, but a few still made it into circulation. Later printings changed Marvel for a maze, and Moore mocked the recall in his top 10 series. And despite this being on a Marvel iceberg, they never pursued or made a comment about the scenario, but it's still a fun bit of history that involves them. The X-Men was a failure. Despite being a pivotal part of the Marvel universe, the mutants didn't have the best start. After debuting in 1963, the series felt like this weird stepchild for the House of Ideas. It plodded along until Marvel stopped creating new stories for the team in 1970. Future issues were just reprints of older stories, and it looked like the team would fade into obscurity until Len Wein and Dave Cockrum made giant-size X-Men in 1975. This introduced an international cast of characters alongside the originals, including Wolverine, Storm, Nightcrawler, and Colossus. The success of this title was beyond belief, with Claremont later taking over the Uncanny X-Men series and turning it into one of the most successful books the company has ever published. Robert Kirkman vs. Marvel. Despite mostly being known for his creator-owned works over at Image, Kirkman did quite a number of years at Marvel, working on books such as Ultimate X-Men, Marvel Team Up, and Marvel Zombies. However, he frequently butted heads with editor-in-chief Joe Quesada and was unhappy with the treatment they received, along with the belief that Marvel deliberately refrained from promoting any of his books. When trying to set up his own interviews, Marvel were allegedly unhappy that he didn't get their approval first, and with the rise of his creator-owned books like The Walking Dead and Invincible, he wanted to be free of his Marvel contract. When creating an event in the Ultimate Universe, he was accused of only caring about the royalties, which seemed to be the turning point for Kirkman walking away from the company. And since then, he's been very vocal on his disdain for how creators are treated over at Marvel, which culminated with a live debate between he and Brian Michael Bendis that has only continued to age well for Kirkman over the years. And with him being a partner over at Image and pretty much all of his properties getting adaptations before they're even on shelves, it's unlikely that he's ever going to return to Marvel. Marvel in Crisis on Infinite Earths. In 1985, DC printed Crisis on Infinite Earths, the grand universe colliding event that reset all of continuity. To do that, every other reality had to be destroyed, and because the creators working on it were George Perez and Marv Wolfman, they decided to take a dig at Marvel Comics, as they claimed the company caused issues which prevented a JLA Avengers crossover from moving forward in the 80s. As such, the Marvel Universe was one of the Earths that got destroyed. This was confirmed in 2017 by Wolfman in a book called Slugfest. However, I read Crisis last year knowing that this panel should be in there, and I still couldn't see it. Thunderbolts charcoal debacle. Now you'll have to forgive me for this one because I found this story baffling when I did my Who Are the Thunderbolts video, and I kinda really like the way that I scripted and filmed that one, so I'm just gonna put it in here. Oh, come on, I need a free pass at some point. I've already done 10 hours of recording. Back in the 90s, Wizard magazine ran a create a villain competition, with the main prize being that whatever you create would eventually end up in one of Marvel's comics. Wallace and Croja Frost were the winners, and they created Charcoal, who debuted in the 19th issue of the Thunderbolts. He first fought the team, but then like any great story arc, he eventually went on to work alongside them. I know, who could have predicted that? He can manipulate fire and form carbon objects such as charcoal and diamonds, and admittedly, saying it out loud, I'd probably go with the latter, but for some reason he went with charcoal. However, because all of the prizes that were originally promised in that Wizard competition were allegedly not awarded, the legal ownership of the character was put into dispute, and because of that they just killed off the character because they thought it'd be the easiest way to solve the problem. Tier 7, we are now in the Abyss. This is the last one, we made it to the final part, but I thought I'd just categorise this as other. This is the weird category where it doesn't really fit any of the other ones, and it's also really off the beaten track. And I know the structuring of these tiers has been a bit fast and loose in this video already, where I've been trying to rank it in terms of obscurity, but it's a bit more difficult with this one, so I'm just going to lump it all together, and it's a bit of a free-for-all, it's just going to be stuff. The infamous drawing of Captain America. Even if you didn't know it was drawn by Rob Liefeld, you've probably seen this image. It's been mocked and memed to oblivion since it was forced on us during the Heroes Reborn era, and despite it looking both overly inflated and also too flat at the same time, people have tried to analyse how this anatomy could be possible. Recently, Liefeld came back to do Falcon Cap in the same pose, and it somehow looks like both an improvement and also a downgrade. It's just bizarre. Tom Cruise Iron Man. But prior to Robert Downey Jr. signing up to play Tony Stark, Cruise was approached in 2005 for the character, but turned it down as he didn't feel like he could bring his everything to the role role and didn't see it panning into the nearly $30 billion franchise it is today. Despite this, he was rumoured again to play a variant of Tony Stark in 2022's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, but like most rumoured cameos for that movie, it didn't happen. But even as recently as a few months ago, those rumours started again as a way to possibly replace Robert Downey Jr.
But how many more times do we have to fall for the same rumour before we stop believing it?
Daredevil was the inspiration for TMNT.
This feels like one of those facts that most people know, but they don't know that they know.
But in 1983, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird were creating a comic that would later evolve into the multi-billion Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise, and it originally started as a parody of Frank Miller's Daredevil. So where Matt Murdock has the hand, the Turtles have the Foot Clan, the Mentor's stick was replaced with Splinter, and the lead characters are all altered due to radioactive material. The initial series was also ridiculously violent for the concept, which was parodying how dark comics were becoming. But it's just crazy to think how this massive franchise might not have existed without Miller's Daredevil. Possible Marvel vs DC game. Everything I can find on this revolves around a single tweet from Ed Boon, who's the creator of Mortal Kombat, which is developed by NetherRealm. In 2022, Boon tweeted out a poll asking which title they should create next, with one of the options and the clear winner being Marvel vs DC. However, there's no history of NetherRealm working with Marvel, and I can't even imagine the legal process to get the two biggest companies in the same game. Hulk no Kung Fu. In a throwaway line of the 12th issue of the 2014 Hulk series by Jerry Dugan and Mark Bagley, the issue starts with Hulk in the dojo of Iron Fist demanding that he teaches him Kung Fu, because being a 400-pound ball of unstoppable muscle really hindered him in his fights before that day. Mark Gruenwald's ashes in Squadron Supreme. We spoke about Squadron Supreme, but Gruenwald was so proud of his work on that title that he had let's just say a unique request in his will. As detailed by his widow in the introduction to the trade paperback of Squadron Supreme, the very ashes of Gruenwald were mixed in with the ink that was printed onto the page. Obviously, a reprint of this specific edition will never be possible again, and genuine copies have gone for massive prices in the second-hand market. J.J. Abrams writes for Marvel. The creative mind involved with big blockbusters such as Star Trek, Star Wars, Cloverfield and Armageddon made his comics debut in 2019. When it was announced that Abrams was taking on a Spider-Man title, there was a bit of intrigue, but not so much when we learned that he was co-writing with his son, and even less so when it was announced that Mary Jane would die in the first issue and it was instead following the son of Peter and MJ. Worse so, there was a delay of nearly a year between issues 3 and 4, which meant that the few people who cared enough to follow it in the first place had completely forgotten about it. So between this and The Rise of Skywalker, you can't really say that 2019 was a great year for Abrams. Thanos Copter. First appearing in Spidey Super Stories issue 39 in December of 1978, the Thanos Copter, as the title would suggest, is a helicopter used by the Mad Titan himself, Thanos. In its debut, he used it to attack Hellcat because she had the Cosmic Cube, and it hasn't appeared much since then, since it kinda diminishes his threat since it looks like it was made out of Meccano, but it can be spotted in the background of one of the episodes of Loki. Cops that arrested Thanos.
You thought we were done with Thanos, and you also thought we were done with Spidey Super Stories issue 39.
After pulling out all the stops with his Thanos Copter, Spider-Man and Hellcat save the day, and Thanos, the Mad Titan who would go on to wipe out half of existence, is apprehended by the New York police.
And I like to think that this isn't a comment on his power, but his belief in the justice system, and that he thinks he'd get a fair jury, and he knows that clearing his name is more important.
Juggernaut is not a mutant. Despite being a prominent member of the Brotherhood of Mutants and being one of the only X-Men characters that I have a figure of, Juggernaut, real name Kane Marco, gains his powers of being an absolute unit from the Kaitarak Ruby.
And if anyone knows where I can find one of these, please let me know. Asking for a friend.
It's only in the Ultimate Universe that Juggernaut is a mutant, and it's one of those issues that's just not really touched on in the movies. Assistant Editors Month. This, I guess, could be counted as an event that took place across Marvel Comics for the issues with a cover date of January 1984. Whilst the regular editors were away at Comic-Con earlier that year, all the issues printed were instead passed through the assistant editors who were clearly not invited to the convention. To celebrate, a warning logo was put on most of the covers, and there's some fun jokes pointing towards the event, such as Foggy being the featured character on Daredevil, and John Byrne leaving a note on one of his front covers. Beta Ray Bill has better stats than most characters on the official Marvel website. Now, Marvel.com has some great biographies for pretty much all of the characters, and a ranking out of 7 is given to the following key areas: durability, energy, fighting skills, intelligence, speed, and strength. Beta Ray Bill, the character who debuted in Thor and was the first character in the comics other than the Odin son to wield Mjolnir, has one of the best rankings out of all of the characters on the website. The only slight blemish is a 5 out of 7 in intelligence, and for context, Reed Richards only scored a 6 in that department. For even further context, Thor only scored a 7 in speed and strength, and from what I've seen, it's only galactic level beings like Galactus that seem to have a better ranking than Bill. Daredevil gets around. This is a narrative that crops up often from Matt Murdock, as over the years he's gone out with quite a number of women throughout the Marvel universe.
And before anyone says anything, I will not stand for any slut shaming on this channel.
The most well-known ones are Elektra and Karen Page. From the Marvel shows, you've got the Night Nurse Claire Temple and She-Hulk, but the more you delve into Daredevil's 60-year history, you'll find a significant relationship with Black Widow. He also got with Black Cat so that she could make Spider-Man jealous. There's also Echo, Typhoid Mary, and even got with his best friend's sister Candice.
What can I say? The guy pulls.
Mantis Willow Lorelli. The Marvel character Mantis was created by Steve Englehart and debuted in Avengers issue 112 in 1973. You might know her from the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, but if that was the point of this entry, it definitely wouldn't be in this low of a tier. What is interesting though is that she is a canon character within the DC universe when she appeared under the name Willow in the Justice League series that was written by Englehart. She now has a child after appearing pregnant in the Marvel universe, and when Englehart went across to Eclipse Comics to write Scorpio Rose, she appeared again under the name Lorelli. And I'm not sure if that's the correct way to pronounce it. I don't exactly hear a lot of people talking about Scorpio Rose. These different names are also acknowledged in one of the issues of the official handbook of the Marvel universe.
And I may get some backlash for saying this, but I don't think she's a fascinating enough character to drag her into 3 different universes.
Thanos bullies the same man every year on his birthday. If you didn't think the Mad Titan was evil already, in Thanos Annual issue number 1, Thanos targeted David from his very first birthday to ensure that his special day every year was just awful. There's no explanation given, and even if he did, I don't think it'd be justified. One year he killed his father, another year he burnt down the university he'd been accepted to, he killed his cat and made him lose his job in the same day, and the worst of all, one year he did nothing just to make David think it was over.
And in a weird way, it's kind of sweet because if you think about it, yeah, there's no way I'm twisting this one.
Reed Richards is an arsehole. Despite being one of the smartest characters in the Marvel universe, you may notice that Mr. Fantastic isn't a great guy to be around. In the 60s, he spent the majority of his time telling Sue to be quiet. He made decisions in the Illuminati which had ramifications such as World War Hulk. He helped create a murderous clone of Thor, and decided to call his best friend the Thing seconds after he became, well, that thing. And only other seconds after he announced himself to be Mr. Fantastic.
Yeah, the guy's a bit of a dick.
Possible LEGO Marvel vs DC game. This was a rumour that was doing the rounds shortly after LEGO Batman 3 released, because after the credits there was a teaser where the silhouette of certain recognisable Marvel figures came through a portal. The image was taken out of context and shared with people who hadn't played the game, because if they had played on they would have realised that this was just a cheeky nod to the other company. And instead of seeing characters like Spider-Man, Iron Man and the Hulk, we instead got Shazam, Nightwing, Green Arrow, Black Canary, Booster Gold and a few others. It should go without saying that actually making such a game would be a licensing nightmare, despite LEGO having already done games for both Marvel and DC. She-Hulk's new design. So this wasn't a permanent thing, but it's in reference again to Jason Aaron's Avengers run, and again it happened in issue 42. But during the Phoenix arc, She-Hulk develops a new look which is more monstrous and caused quite a bit of backlash when it debuted. Although like most things in comics, the backlash was quite unnecessary because a few issues later, it was all reversed. The interview got Spider-Man into the MCU.
This is one of those sequence of events that was so unlikely to happen that when you say it out loud, it makes me realise that we are living in the parallel universe.
But the 2014 movie The Interview had a plot where James Franco and Seth Rogen were interviewing Kim Jong-un. It was rife with controversy and almost caused an international incident. Additionally, in a bid to try and sway them from releasing the movie, Sony Pictures was hacked with confidential emails being released. There were a number of big stories that came from this, one of which being that Marvel executives had been speaking with Sony about the possibility of incorporating Spider-Man into the MCU. Because of the backlash after this reveal and it not coming to fruition, it opened up negotiations again, and it's possible that this never would have happened if it hadn't have been for the interview. Stan Lee's favourite DC character. During a 2008 Reddit Ask Me Anything, Stan Lee was questioned on who his favourite DC hero is. His response was,
DC?
Yeah.
Lobo. Well, I don't know if you can call him a hero.
It's strange then that he never took on the character during his Just Imagine series. Marvel's Kiss comic inked with blood. In another example of creators putting everything into a book, this one is from 1977's Marvel Comics Super Special issue number 1.
Which had the 4 members of Kiss on the front cover, who I should probably know by name, and my dad's probably going to disown me for forgetting.
They had the blood drawn and mixed in with the ink that went towards the first issue, and I have no idea how many pints they must have needed. Quicksilver isn't that fast. Now don't get the title wrong, because if I got into a race with Quicksilver, Quicksilver, I'm definitely gonna lose.
But if he calls me out, I will be there.
But in the grand scheme of speedsters, including all the members of the Speed Force from DC, Pietro works at a snail crawl by comparison. Sure, it depends which writer is on the title, but Quicksilver pushed himself to near death to reach light speed, and his speed is said to be between Mach 4 and Mach 10, whereas the Flash is theorized to be able to run at Mach 10,925, so a smidge quicker. Gladiator is a jobber,
And I had to look up slang for this one, so hopefully my street credit's improved.
but a jobber is a term used in wrestling for a wrestler who is only there to be defeated by bigger names and make them look better. And Gladiator is a character who was introduced in the 70s through the X-Men and was even Captain Universe at one point. However, he often finds himself on the wrong side of a fight. And I don't really know the full history of Gladiator, and he doesn't have a box rec that I can check, but a quick Google search shows that he's lost to Nova, Cannonball, Thor, Hulk, and sometimes lost due to losing his confidence. Poor guy, he really is the Tyron Woodley of the Marvel Universe. And don't get twisted, I'm talking the post-Usman Woodley. Sabretooth and Wolverine aren't related. Because of the X-Men Origins Wolverine movie, which nobody really seemed to watch or care about, this is a common misconception that's mostly spread about by non-comic fans, that Logan and Victor Creed are brothers, half-brothers, or at least bare minimum cousins.
No idea where that last one comes from.
However, it might surprise you that in a movie that thought this was a good representation of Deadpool, that this isn't a fact within the comics, as Wolverine and Sabretooth are just enemies in the source material. And the reason for this is due to Wolverine killing Victor's real brother, so something must have just got lost in translation. Doctor Doom is the best possible ruler. This is a narrative that shows up in arguments from time to time when people will ask who the best leader is in comics, and being the ruler of Latveria, a country which has significantly less attacks per year than New York, Wakanda, or pretty much the majority of Marvel locations, the argument could be made that that's a result of Doom's leadership.
Well, I'm not saying I agree with you, but they make some good points.
Moon Knight ketamine memes. God, I struggled saying that. This is a bizarre one, the origin mostly coming from Reddit, but a few years ago before the Disney Plus show, a bunch of images of panels were shared about with Moon Knight asking various heroes, or in some cases just demanding, to get him ket. Can't lie, the first one you see is quite convincing, but then it just becomes really funny. Spider-Man meets Obama.
And nope, they didn't turn him into MODOK for this one. They probably wanted to avoid getting super political.
Published in January 2009, and it was specifically the same week that Obama was being inaugurated, there was a backup feature in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 583 where Peter Parker met the president. The chameleon was trying to take his position, and this isn't the first or last time that a president has secretly been accused of being a lizard, and Peter had to try and outsmart him, but interestingly this event has gone largely forgotten about, despite it selling over 350,000 copies and going through 5 printings, which managed to make it the highest selling regular series book of the 2000s. Doom dog poop bags.
In the world of merchandising, there's been very few items that have truly left me speechless, but this is one of them.
Doctor Doom is probably most famous for being the arch enemy of the Fantastic Four, or the ruler of Latveria, or even the best character in both Secret Wars, and apparently those accolades are enough to get him his own brand of Doom dog poop bags. The Doctor prefix may have been dropped, but the image is undeniably Victor. And what an odd crossover, I honestly can't believe that Marvel doesn't have a problem with this.
And if it is, I'd find that really odd that they'd allow this, but not Spider-Man on a 4-year-old's tombstone.
Sergio Aragonés massacres Marvel. Spanish comic artist Sergio Aragonés did the art for a 1996 one-shot whereby he, as the title would suggest, finds different ways to kill members of the Marvel Universe. All the main figures within Marvel face his wrath, and I'm not sure what they did to him in the first place, but it's safe to say that this isn't set within the 616 continuity. Hammer isn't an acronym. The Marvel Universe is littered with acronyms: shield, aim, sword, spear, and there's probably more, I'm just too lazy to Google it, but the most famous villainous one is Hammer. However, despite popular belief, it doesn't actually stand for anything. Norman Osborn just named it that because it sounded like the thing that would work against a shield. And maybe he also hoped that his enemies would be too busy figuring out what it stood for that he could actually get a sneak attack in. 616 was first used by Captain Britain, although there are some conflicting stories on who first called the regular Marvel Universe Earth 616 within the office. Its first use in the comics was by Captain Britain in Daredevil's issue 7 from 1983, so Alan Moore, Alan Davies and Dave Thorpe are credited with its creation, with that specific Earth designation still being used today. However, the term has been rumoured to be a product of Thorpe not being a fan of modern superhero stories and wanting to separate those from what he enjoyed when he was younger, and 616 sounded similar enough to the number of the beast, and somehow it just caught on. Although if he hated it that much, why not just call it Earth 666? The true cross in Doctor Doom's armour. In issue 10 of the criminally underrated Captain Britain and MI13, Doctor Doom reveals that splinters from the cross Jesus Christ was crucified on are in his armour. I'm not certain how he got these, but they're there just in case he ever runs into Dracula,
and that's the kind of planning ahead that I appreciate.
Buried Alien is Barry Allen. Debuting in the 17th issue of Quasar in 1990, the buried alien was discovered as a speedster with amnesia from an alternate universe. If the power set wasn't clue enough, the initials are a clear reference to Barry Allen, who, at the time of buried alien's arrival, had died during Crisis on Infinite Earths. Within this issue of Quasar, he's also referred to as the fastest man alive, which should be a slap in the face to Quicksilver, but despite this, he's never outright named as Barry. I am the master of the world. This quote is in relation to Eshu, who debuted in Alpha Flight issue 2, and he was a 40,000-year-old caveman who was mutated into an immortal world conqueror with his eyes set on Earth. This led him into conflict with Alpha Flight, which is where he declared that he is the master of the world, which is also one of his known aliases. The Mexicans who jumped Silver Surfer.
And I'm not sure if Mexicans is the politically correct term, that's just what it says on the iceberg.
But in the first issue of the Silver Surfer Ultimate Cosmic Experience that was written by Stan Lee and illustrated by Jack Kirby, there's a scene where the cosmic entity, the Herald of Galactus, the being who has single-handedly fought the Fantastic Four and countless other superpowered beings, is distracted, attacked, and nearly kidnapped by a gang dressed like mariachis. Again, I'm just providing the facts, I'm declining to add any comment to this. Black Bolt as Batman. There's probably other fun facts like this, but Anson Mount, who would play Black Bolt in the Inhumans TV show and during Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, was also the voice of Batman in the 2021 animated movie of Injustice. Probably for the best then that Black Bolt's not known for talking. Aunt May, Herald of Galactus. May Parker, the aunt of Spider-Man, because I refused to acknowledge that she might be his mom, was given tickets to the circus by her nephew in issue 138 of Marvel Team-Up. There she was sat next to the Fantastic Four and Franklin Richards. Galactus, sensing the immense power within Franklin, appeared at the circus and tried to turn him into his herald. Franklin deflected the beam, causing it to hit Aunt May, who then became the Herald of Galactus. This means she gets the same cosmic powers that are bestowed to a herald, along with the duties, and went under the name Golden Oldie. Squirrel Girl is the strongest Marvel character.
I didn't add this one in here, so don't flame me in the comments.
But Squirrel Girl, who starred in her own ongoing series for the first time in 2014, is theorised to potentially be the strongest Marvel character. The reasoning for this is because she's already beaten Deadpool, Doctor Doom, Thanos, and even Galactus. Which begs the question, who could beat her?
And all I'm saying is, you didn't hear my name on that list of people she's beaten.
She-Hulk kills John Byrne. John Byrne's run on She-Hulk is well regarded, especially for its use of a character being able to break the fourth wall. The 50th issue, and Byrne's last in the sensational She-Hulk, sees Jennifer Walters have to choose a new creative team to take over after John Byrne has been declared dead. By the end of the issue, John reappears, but annoys She-Hulk to the point where she throws him out of a window. And it's from a pretty great height, so I think we can assume that he didn't survive. Jesus saved Ghost Rider. In 1974, in a bid to try and steal Johnny Blaze's soul, Mephisto created two illusions. One that was of Satan himself, and the other was a friend, and again I'm doing air quotes, who looks a lot like Jesus. And even Johnny thought it might be him. However, because of the fear of backlash and the obvious resemblance, the script was changed so that the Jesus lookalike was called out to remove any doubt.
But let's just be honest, it's still pretty much Jesus.
Hulk eats his own ass. This is a meme that I can't find any comic backing for, and I feel like I would have if this was real. The meme just says, the Hulk once became so powerful he could bend over and eat his own ass.
And there's no proof in the meme itself, but who knows if this will inspire writers in future.
Spider-Sense puts the user in danger, so there's some debate on this one, but I've seen the argument crop up on a few message boards. The theory is that Spider-Sense, the ability that detects danger before it happens to give the user a chance to react, is actually more damaging than not having it. The logic is that because of the heightened awareness, the user is guided towards the danger whilst being a vigilante, and thus causing them to be in more danger than if they didn't have it in the first place. And honestly, I don't know where I stand on this debate. Mysterio saved Black Cat from assault, but during the 6-issue miniseries, Spider-Man Black Cat, The Evil That Men Do, which was written by Kevin Smith, Black Cat is almost R-worded by Garrison Klom, until she's saved by his brother Francis Klom. The two become friends, but after a violent encounter with Spider-Man that leaves him disfigured, he buys a second-hand Mysterio costume from the Kingpin.
The original entry in this iceberg said that Mysterio was the one to commit the assault, but I don't know if I'm just getting lazy in my research, but Francis was the one who saved it that went on to be Mysterio.
I want to turn people into dinosaurs. In the second issue of Spider-Man and the X-Men, Peter Parker confronts Sauron as his plans of changing DNA are revealed. Spider-Man tells him he could do anything with this power, even cure cancer, to which Sauron responds, "But I don't want to cure cancer, I want to turn people into dinosaurs." And you know what? It's hard to argue with a guy who knows what he wants. Master Chief Star-Lord. In Season 2 of Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes, the Guardians of the Galaxy appear for an episode, with Peter Quill being voiced by Steve Downes. Although this is the only TV credit on his Wikipedia, he's more widely known for being the voice of Master Chief in the Halo series. So for that one episode, Star-Lord had the same voice as Master Chief. The Black Leopard. T'Challa may be best known as the Black Panther, but during Fantastic Four issue 119 back in 1971, he briefly changed his superhero persona to the Black Leopard. The reason for this was due to the rise in publicity of the real-life Black Panther Party, and writer Roy Thomas wanted to distance the character from any possible controversy, despite the comic character predating the political movement. However, this change was short-lived, as when T'Challa featured in Avengers issue 99, which was also written by Roy Thomas, he was just referred to as T'Challa, and no mention was made of a leopard. Angela first appeared in Spawn. The Asgardian mercenary, who's also previously been a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy, made a first 616 appearance in Age of Ultron issue 10, which was released in June 2013. However, her creators are still credited as Neil Gaiman and Todd McFarlane, because her very first comic appearance was in issue 9 of Image Comics' Spawn. She was an angelic bounty hunter who later died in issue 100, spoiler alert, and I can't imagine how messy the rights dispute would have been given the fight that Gaiman put up over Miracle Man. Juggernaut and She-Hulk. No, this isn't the name of some bad diss track or clothing line, it's Juggernaut and She-Hulk in bed together, which happened in Uncanny X-Men issue 435. Although this likely would have been one of those scenes that people would have been outraged about initially and then forgotten about in a few months, instead they tried to explain this in a way that's so convoluted that even X-Men fans can't justify it. After this issue, it's revealed that there's a parallel universe where non-powered versions of our regular superheroes and supervillains exist, and during issue 435 they swapped places with the 616 universe counterparts, and therefore inherited those powers for the first time. So essentially this is a Jennifer Walters who spent the majority of her life as a regular lawyer, and for the first time she's getting to experience what it's like to be in the body of She-Hulk.
And she's not the only one in She-Hulk for the first time in this issue.
She-Hulk and Spider-Woman created for copyright purposes. Jessica Drew debuted as Spider-Woman in Marvel Spotlight issue 32, published back in February of 1977, and Jennifer Walters made her first appearance in her own title, The Savage She-Hulk, back in November of 1979. And despite the lack of similarities between the two characters, their behind-the-scenes origins are largely the same. Due to the popularity of both Spider-Man and the Hulk, Marvel were concerned that female versions of them could be created which they wouldn't technically own the rights for. For She-Hulk, this fear came about because the same thing happened with the $6 Million Man, and the Incredible Hulk show was only growing in popularity. Funnily enough, those fears weren't completely unfounded, as the 5th season of The Hulk would have introduced Bruce Banner's sister, who needed a blood donor that would have caused her to Hulk out. Mystique was meant to be Nightcrawler's father. It's now canon that Mystique is now Nightcrawler's mother, but Chris Claremont's original plan was for Destiny to be his mother, and Mystique to be his father. Because of her shape-shifting ability, that's what would have allowed her to be the father, but the Comics Code Authority wasn't a fan of LGBT characters or themes, so the storyline was scrapped, and Nightcrawler's dad was some Bavarian aristocrat, which was then later confusingly retconned by Chuck Austin. Yancey Street can teleport. The home of Ben Grimm was established to be in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, connecting the Bowery to the Williamsburg Bridge. However, during the 11th issue of Dan Slott's Fantastic Four run, Yancey Street is shown as intersecting 4th Street, and in the 15th issue intersecting with 10th Avenue, neither of which are located in the Lower East Side, meaning that Yancey Street can teleport. Danny DeVito and Paris Hilton in Iron Man. In issue 4 of Matt Fraction's The Invincible Iron Man, it's clear where artist Salvador LaRocca got his inspiration for Mr. and Mrs. Gross. Despite the weird amount of tan, this is clearly supposed to be Danny DeVito and Paris Hilton, which makes me ask, who the hell was the inspiration for Reed Richards at the beginning of this issue? Crimson Cowl and the New 52. This is a theory that I wish would have been true, but in 2011, when DC Comics was rebooting the continuity with the New 52, which, yes, of course, is my jam. There's even a t-shirt to prove it on maddogcomics.com. There was a hooded female character that appeared when the universe was being reset in Flashpoint issue 5, and she also appeared in the background of a lot of the new issue 1s. An early theory that gained traction is that it was the character who would be the catalyst for an eventual crossover between Marvel and DC. Some theorized it could be the Crimson Cowl, who was a villain of the Thunderbolts who could possibly get their hands on a few Infinity Gems. But this speculation went nowhere, and the character was revealed to be Pandora, who firmly stayed in the DC universe.
But it was fun to dream.
The two cops of Marvel and DC. One Marvel/DC secret crossover that did prove to be legit, with these two cops that were first discovered by writer Scott Snyder. They were mostly seen in kid-targeted books, but they've arrested Lex Luthor, the Vulture, and they've been seen helping Spider-Man, Robin, Batman, and countless other heroes. And they have gone largely unnoticed despite their commitment to preventing interdimensional crime. The Forgotten Spider-Man. But this entry is in reference to a little-known creepypasta, and like pretty much 90% of all creepypastas, it tells tells the story of someone discovering a lost issue whereby the character you thought you knew, in this case Spider-Man, became evil and started killing people for no reason whatsoever. The costume's different and no one within the world has any knowledge of this forgotten Spider-Man.
And no disrespect to the person who wrote this, but this is a very paint-by-numbers creepypasta. Like, if you've read one of them, you've pretty much read them all.
Everyone forgot about Forget-Me-Not. He was a mutant who was first introduced in X-Men Legacy issue 300 in March 2014 and has the ability of imperceptibility, whereby he cannot be remembered by anyone unless he is stood directly in front of them. Since his introduction, he's only appeared in a handful of issues, but ironically he appeared a few months ago in an issue of Legion of X, whereby he died.
And don't get annoyed at that spoiler, nobody cared about him anyway, since most of the comic reading community forgot about him, so maybe his power did work.
The One Above All isn't above all. So we spoke about the One Above All previously and had to really dig into this one, but despite effectively being the god of the Marvel Universe, the One Above All has slipped up before. In Thanos Infinity Final from 2016, he and Adam Warlock devised a plan where it was revealed that they knew something that the One Above All didn't. Corey in the House is Marvel canon. This is a 2007 sitcom that ran for 2 seasons. It was a spin-off of That's So Raven, which had a crossover with The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, which had a character in it called Mr. Mosby. He has also appeared as the same character in Phineas and Ferb, which has also crossed over with Marvel as we mentioned earlier, so by this long-winded explanation, whoever this Corey is and whatever house he lives in must somehow exist in a universe with Marvel characters.
And no word yet on if he sided with Captain America or Iron Man during Civil War.
Kilometers Sin.
Yep, we're ending this with a dumb meme that made a little bit of traction back in 2020,
where the character Miles Morales was represented with an evil alter ego known as Kilometers Sin.
However, as of yet, this hasn't been referenced in the comics, and if you don't know what you're about to see, it may scare the shit out of you for a second, apparently. And with that, we come to the end of the Marvel Iceberg. If you've got to this point, then thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Do you want another one? Thank you. I haven't done my final watch through yet, so I don't know how well this one turned out, but I am just so happy that it's finally done. Iceberg videos are ones that I've really enjoyed for a while now, and I wish that I'd been a big enough channel so that I could have done one myself. Hopefully that hiatus that I've taken for about a month now in terms of uploading has really been worth it and you've really enjoyed this. I just wanted a passion project so that I could prove to myself that I could just do one of these big videos. And honestly, I didn't know if I could. I know there's people who've made entire channels based on icebergs, but I'm just somebody who's doing this part-time. I've been working during my breaks and dinners at work, coming home and doing an extra 4 hours, waking up an extra couple hours early just so that I could work on this, and I just really hope it resulted in a good video. If not, then I've given me all to this video and I don't really know what more I can do. But yeah, I know this one probably isn't perfect, and there's going to be somebody in the comments that's saying like, why did you miss this? Why did you miss that? Because Marvel's had quite a lot of stuff going on over the years. And what I will say before I end this is support the videos that you want to see. If this video does really well, then yeah, I'd love to do more like this in future, but I don't always have a lot of spare time, so I really have to be selective with the videos that I make. So if you like this, please leave a nice comment, give it a thumbs up, share this video where you can, it will really help. Walk down the street and just tell everybody that you see to watch this. Okay, that last one might be a bit risky, but that's all I really have to say on this. This video's probably already been long enough. I need a sleep, I think I need a cry. I've got a coffee that you can donate to if you really enjoyed this video and you've seen the work that's gone into it, and there's also merch if you want to be an official member of the Dog Pound. But that's enough shameless self-promotion, and again, just thank you if you made it to this part of the video, but until next time, just make sure that you stay safe, and stay mad all you dogs. Woof woof. See you in the next video.